I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for April 6, 2022. Roll call.
Arel? Here. Budke?
Here.
Kuhn? Lunsky?
Here.
Matichek?
Here.
Reichert?
Here.
Sandy? Here. Schumacher?
Here.
Wasvik?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, did I hear Mr. Kuhn on there? I just want to make sure. I thought I heard a faint. Okay, we'll just move on. If something comes up, let me know. If you hear Mr. Kuhn, come on, anybody. With that, reading and approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, March 2. Mr. Reichert.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Reichert, second by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are submitted as read. No item 3. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item for tonight is we are requesting to have item 4.4, which was informational, was the annexation, asking for that to be added as an item for action tonight. It was referred to us by the City Council on Monday night. To accomplish this, we would need to make an amendment to add to the agenda. It would need to be 100%. I also wanted to inform you, they did put a time limit on it. They put it on 30 days. So this is our meeting that falls within that time frame. So we're recommending putting it on. And we did have it as informational tonight. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
I guess I bring it back. What we need to do is, if we want to hear this thing, we make a motion, vote 100% unanimously. It goes on item 4.4 for tonight. With that, does anybody entertain a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Matichek, second by Mr. Budke. Further discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I would say that is a unanimous vote.
Well, that is
Moving
4.4.
forward to item 4.4.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I have to disclose that I work at Bergstrom Electric, one of the areas and businesses being annexed in. We need to disclose that, so with that.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Wasvik. I'll interject. He spoke to me about this previously, and the rule is that if you've got what's called a direct and substantial pecuniary interest in the matter, a member of a governing body is required to disclose that conflict or potential conflict. And a direct pecuniary interest generally is related to whether you have pecuniary interest is a direct interest related to money in an action or a case. So if the primary questions that I usually review and determine if there's a pecuniary interest is if your vote would either benefit you financially or impact you positively or negatively in your employment status. And as I understand, Mr. Wasvik, the property is, you have some ownership interest in the property, and the annexation issue may cause an increase in the value of that particular property that you have an interest in. Is that accurate?
That is very accurate, okay. Yes.
And so it's sufficient, in my estimation, that probably gives rise to a conflict with respect to the annexation component. I don't see the replatting, because that's, you're drawing lines on a map, as necessarily on property that isn't related to Mr. Wasvik, or the rezoning is not with respect to Mr. Wasvik's property. It's another parcel that is up for, so it would be directed to that annexation component. And so the way the law sets up is governing body members have an obligation and duty to vote on matters. And so the way the Attorney General has directed, and actually North Dakota Supreme Court has directed, is that the non-conflicted members should present a motion to allow Mr. Wasvik to participate in the vote. If that motion would pass, then Mr. Wasvik would, irrespective of that conflict, would have the ability to vote on that particular matter. If that motion that fails, then Mr. Wasvik would be precluded from voting on the particular matter. So what I would recommend for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and Mr. Wasvik probably wouldn't be, given the conflict, I would ask that the Assistant Chair, Mr. Reichert, ask for that motion to permit Mr. Wasvik to vote on the matter irrespective of the conflict.
Is there a motion?
I will move that. What am I supposed to say? That we allow Mr. Wasvik to vote on 4-4.
Is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Lunsky. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
With that, just so it's clear, Mr. Wasvik, you're now permitted to vote on the annexation matter because you've disclosed the conflict and it was a positive vote to allow him to participate.
Here we go. And I thought you guys were going to let me off the hook tonight. Man. I tried. We roll with it?
Yeah?
All right.
Fine with it.
It is what it is. Let's go. All right, Mr. Brooks, you, number 4.
Perfect. Let me load this up just so we can show it as well to the people through Zoom. So give me just a second. Okay, I should be out in Zoom land as well. And can we, Steve, could you hit that second controller down? I think that'll...
The second. Oh.
Number?
Thank you.
That's
Makes it a little bit easier to see.
How's that?
4-0.
I guess we'll probably have to read in 4-4 when we get there.
Yeah, so what I plan on doing, just so everybody knows, providing background on everything. I know that it's going to be hard to untwine them, so I'll provide some background to the entire piece, and then we'll read each 4-1, 4-2, 3, and 4 into the record, but prior to the vote. So 4-0 is not an action item, it was just a way for us to identify that all of them are on the agenda. It was the background for all 4 of those items, so.
We'll want to, just so everybody knows, are we okay with hearing all of it at once? Like we've done a million times in the past, breaking it up, voting on each item separate. Okay?
Okay. Thank you. So, Chair Wasvik, members of the commission, we provided you guys with all the backgrounds of presentations that have been done over the last couple months, and the folks are here in the audience that did all those presentations to City Council. I didn't plan on bringing them all up. We had those for your background information, but the folks are here and can certainly answer any questions if you guys have any during that piece of it. So if there's anything that you have questions on as we go through, folks are here from EDC, assessing, and city administration, and of course city attorney is here as well to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to enter right into the items that will be before you tonight that really focuses in a lot of what our responsibilities are as the Planning Commission in making recommendations up to City Council. So with that, I'll start that presentation, and again, I'm available to questions any point. So in terms of tonight, what the action items will be: plat, rezoning, vacation, and then the annexation that was referred and then added just now by City Council. So the plat, we see these all the time. It's the breaking up of the property. Right now, this property is 5 parcels. It's as I understand it, and it's being broken up into multiple parcels. Actually 3 parcels total, And the plat's so large, actually, it fits onto 3 sheets. Here's the first sheet. It's the southern part of the property. There's some additional detail provided here that kind of shows what's going on down in this one corner that I believe XL Energy has a little piece there that they're working around with some of the easements. Lot 2 is going to be where the proposed development would be. Lot 3 is the storm pond. As I go to the second page, this is to the north now. So again, Lot 2, that was the north piece of that last. The Lot 1 is the English Coulee diversion, which is actually owned by the city. But we included that because it was still meets and bounds description and bordered on here. So the city had that included as well. Last month, we split up this op second here, so that's that Lot 2, still to be recorded, but it's part of this plat as well. There's a vacation that's on the west side of that stormwater pond. So if I go back up to that previous piece, there's, right now there's some existing right-of-way that are, here's that pond lot. And we're no longer needing that with the way that this is laid out. So here's a little bit better look of it, and you can see where it says vacated 32nd here. So that'll be item 3.2. I'll show you another picture of that here shortly. And there it is. This piece was vacated previously. So that kind of covers 4.1 and 4.2. Pretty simple pieces on that, and if you'd like, I'll just continue on as we discussed.
Please do.
So the rezoning is the next piece. Right now, it's in agricultural. It's being proposed to move to PUD. And just like we've always talked about the land use plan, which actually is on this later on the agenda, the 2045 land use plan that was adopted in 2016 is shows this area as industrial. There's a small piece that was agricultural because we just weren't sure where everything was going to go. That's along the interstate. But nearly this entire area was all pieced together as industrial at that time. To the north of this is industrial, and I'll go through and show some of those in a bit. And to the south of here, the Simplot area was industrial as well. It's just an industrial in nature area, and it's difficult to believe that anything else would go there other than industrial. So that's kind of where it's been on our radar as future industrial. Here's a zoning map. So it's still sat as ag, as I mentioned, so that's that green piece. To the north, this is Mindac Seeds is up here on the north side. Here's some warehousing, and then further up, I want to say that's CF Industries there. Those are all zoned industrial today. To the east of this site are those businesses that are along the west side of North Washington. They're zoned industrial I-2 as well, and a lot of those are existing businesses. To the south is zoned industrial, so here's you have some of the Corinthal property here, still zoned industrial today. This particular piece is vacant, and then you have some different ownerships as you head to the south. Red River Refinery, Philly Mac, Simplot's just off the page here. This is that area that commonly referred to as a Corinthia area. So just giving you a sense of what's bordering on the property. Here's a setup of where this property sits within all that in terms of zoning. Again, industrial to the north, industrial to the south. We're actually including in these pieces. There's a few ag zonings that are still going to be left. I anticipate getting requests from those potentially in the future to change those to industrial as well. Just to give you some context, we've heard a lot about distances, how far this is from other uses. Specifically, anytime you're talking about industrial, the question that comes up is how far away you are from residential. So for some context to that, here's the state mill. And the heights on some of these are 180 feet in terms of height. But closest residential is just under 1,200 feet. This is an area that's been around for a number of years. I don't think we'd set up another area like this in the future, but this has been around for quite some time, existing owners, those types of things, and that's why it was probably that close. Not something that we do again. Here's another look at that state mill, and like I said, the heights are rather substantial. But again, it's been there forever. I think most people are used to it, but we still do hear some concerns from some folks in terms of noise and those types of things, just due to that proximity. So trying to push those out a little bit further of a distance from residential for new industrial. Next site, Simplot. Here, and as I go to the south to the Lake Agassiz neighborhood, you're looking at under 1,000 feet. So it's closer to about 825, under 850 anyway. And that's your distances to some of those residential. Again, been in place for many years. I want to say this development was probably in the 60s that this was put in through that Darwin Drive, Shakespeare area along Stanford Road. So, and Simplot was existing, as I understand it, at that time. So that's your distances to those. Some of that high bay freezer that we approved recently, some of you on the commission at that time, that's about 140, 150 range in terms of height of building with that. And that is on that northern side, so that newer building here, that's the height on that. And that's the picture of it. I think a lot of people, as they go by, understand where that's at. Distance is pretty close to some of those existing residential. In addition, I want to talk a little bit about what's to the north. So here's Mindak Seeds. Here's the edge of the property being rezoned here, and here's where that diversion ditch is, that lot 1, and then lot 2 would be just to the south. But just to the north of this, there's some existing agricultural industry going on, Mindak Seeds. And here's what that looks like. This is a shot from the interstate. I pulled this from Google Earth, but that's what that looks like from the interstate. Here's to the south, here's 40th running through here. That's essentially the northern edge of that property. And you're over 100 feet with this building, and I think you're well over 150 as you get to some of those high points on that as well. Here's the PUD that's being requested, and the I-2 is the type of uses that we're looking to put into this PUD, and in addition, we're looking at those similar heights as well in terms of 150 foot on some of the buildings, and I kind of went through, we're over that with some that are even closer to some existing residential. The exception areas are kind of drawn out here, and what could potentially be in those locations, potential wastewater there. But in terms of heights, they did pull back about 800 feet here from 27th Avenue North before they could get up to that 150. So they're leaving themselves a pretty large buffer on that southern edge as well. The last piece is the Survey of Annexation. And in terms of things that we looked at there, we looked at some of the existing businesses and whether there was platted lots that were in place as well. So some of those are essentially ready for development. And so those are some of the things that we looked at in terms of bringing this area in. The existing city limits is located, just recently we did this small annexation up here on Old Mill Road where it connects with North Washington. We did that, if you recall, that was a city project. We were in the process of improving that roadway, and that was kind of a roadway that was kind of a question of whose responsibility it was. I believe the city's certainly been maintaining a lot of that, and in addition, we found out we're actually been plowing North Washington for many years already, the city has been, so that was some of the responsibility we needed to look at. City limit, current city limit comes down here, comes around. This location's currently in, and then wraps around, and these are some of the areas to the south. There's some developed areas here that we're looking to include, but certainly both areas of Washington, north and south. The small piece of, there's about 3 businesses along Old Mill Road as well on the west side, and then up to and including the city's diversion channel. And then on the west side, roughly is the railroad tracks. Along the west side, it's normally known as the Glaston Sub. And down here is the tank farm. I think it's owned by CHS today, and that's currently within city limits as well. To the south, we have a existing annexation agreement with Corinthas not to annex any additional land. That was one of the reasons that we didn't include anything further to the south that was owned by them.
Ryan,
So-
how big is that? How big is that piece to the south? They just showed a corner of it.
Here, this one or this?
What is not annexed at this time? They're not going in with this they're not going in with this and it's not annexed.
In terms of acreage, it would probably, I want to say it's probably over 100 acres that Corinthas still have for development. And that's just off the top of my head.
300, yeah.
No, it's not 300 acres that Corinthas have.
The farmland's still there, yes.
We can check that, but it,
Just kind of been working on not leaving islands and pockets everywhere, so I just my own curiosity killing me on that,
sure.
talking about that.
On that, no, can
I can check that here shortly. too.
Miss Sandy?
Yeah, so what is the reason that that wouldn't be annexed as well?
There's a current annexation agreement that we have that was put into place that the city entered into about 5 years ago, not to annex anything until it was requested by the Corinthas. So I want to say that was about 5 years ago. The city entered into that agreement. It was part of getting that area set up, and
How long does that agreement go for?
I'm not aware of an expiration date.
Mr. Matichek, I saw your hand.
I don't know about the agreement. We were never privy to that. I understand what they're doing because they've developed some property with Mr. Krint over the years, and apparently they've made some agreements with him. I'm not privy to that, so that's probably why he's not getting annexed.
No, good points. Just a question I have. I'm going to ask a few.
Whenever you're ready for questions, I have a few if you want.
Should we go through them?
I think, let's let Mr. Brooks
Sure,
finish.
whenever he's done.
So the next thing we're kind of looking at is why the annexation. And this is straight out of North Dakota Century Code. Some of the things that we look at is present uses, planned future uses, development of the areas sought to be annexed. These are developed areas currently. And other than the potential for the new plant site, whether the area sought to be annexed is part of the community of the annexing city. I think if most people went along North Washington, it'd be very difficult to see where city limits starts or where it would stop as you headed north along the city, other than when you got outside of the diversion channel. But even there, as I showed, there's some existing businesses to the north as well, some existing industry. The educational, recreational, civic, social, religious, industrial, commercial, or city facilities and services made available by or in the annexing city to any resident, business, industry, or employee of the business or industry located in the area sought to be annexed. So we would be providing services up to this area. And I do want to point out, I know I've had this question, there's no residents being, that we're aware of, there's no residents being annexed as part of this. Whether any governmental services or facilities of the annexing city are and can be made available to the area sought to be annexed. So we are going through that. One of the pieces that we had, I think, was showed where some of the planned utilities would come up to this area. Economic, physical, and social relationship of the inhabitants, businesses, or industries of the area sought to be annexed to the annexing city and to the school district or other political subdivisions. Right now, they are paying school district taxes up there as well. But I think you can say most of these, all the businesses that I'm aware of are seem to be a part of the city of Grand Forks. Most people would identify that as part of the city of Grand Forks. I think there's a community of interest up there with the city of Grand Forks. The economic impact of the proposed annexation on the property owners in the area of the proposed annexation, and the economic impact on the annexing city of a decision to deny the annexation. So we did provide some of those pieces. The city assessor did do an evaluation that was part of the attachments, as well as the special assessments as well. And then whether the area proposed to be annexed is in the ET zone and subdivision regulations authority of another city. So in this case, as we've said, this is within the city of Grand Forks. It's adjacent to the city of Grand Forks in this area. So those are the evaluation pieces that we really need to look at as part of the North Dakota Century Code. And then we also did the annexation point rating system. In this case, it came out as an 18, and hopefully that's available to you as well. And with that, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Sandy?
I have a few questions. Do they currently have flood protection?
They do, yes. This is within the flood protection. The very north edge is that diversion channel.
So they were assessed for they did have special assessments for flood protection?
So as they get annexed, they'll be special assessed. We cannot special assess until they've been annexed.
So is that accrue interest, or how does that?
It does
so
not,
they've
as
been
I understand it.
benefiting from
It's
but
that
not-
set amount from
Okay.
20 years ago. It's a
Okay.
price per square foot.
So who's the fire service?
Currently, it's Manville Fire.
Oh, okay.
And then this would come into City of Grand Forks.
So what other than flood protection, and then the city's been doing the snow removal?
Yeah, as I understand it, I checked with Public Works, and the city does do snow removal. And we've been doing some improvements along 27th, trying to help out, because the 27th has been in rough shape as well in the past. So, and then up on that Old Mill Road, city engineering department worked with to help do that improved roadway. And then we did the annexation just on that right away, I want to say last fall. But that was really trying to improve some of those roads that have been kind of needed some improvement.
Is there any other area in town that has flood protection but isn't annexed into the city?
Yeah, there's quite a few that are farmland that's around the city. Like if you think Merrifield Road is the southern boundary,
Okay.
and city limits goes to 62nd.
Yep.
If you go to the west, where the diversion tie-in is, yeah, there's still land like around West Walmart.
So
along
islands?
Yeah.
Any of the islands?
Yeah, there's some islands too, and that was one of the things that we've talked about in the past, trying to do away with some of those areas and trying to annex some of those. So this would be one area that we've talked about, not an island per se, but certainly an area that had community of interest. It was looked at about 40 years ago, and we're back here again today. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Matichek, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Mr. Brooks, in all my 30 years on this commission, this is the first time that, unless I missed it in my packet, that there wasn't a copy of the PUD. Was there a reason for that? Because we usually get to look at the PUD before the meeting. The first time I'm seeing the PUD is tonight.
It wasn't in your packet under 4.2?
I didn't see it there.
Then that was missed. I apologize. Hopefully everybody else had that available too. I know we print out your packet and Mr. Kuhn, so those might have been the two, but they were connected in. So
Okay, because it's the first time I've ever had to vote on a PUD and I haven't seen it before the evening. I think, whatever reason you did that. Okay, we can argue about that. Couple of comments. First of all, the annexation point rating system, that's just a guide for you. That is not a law, right?
The annexation point system?
It's just a guide for the planning department. It's not a law that if you meet the points, doesn't mean you have to be annexed, right?
This is, that's a local tool that we use.
Right. And just for clarification, the school tax is everybody in Faulkner Township up to 54th pays Grand Forks District Number 1 school taxes, just so that's clarified.
If I said something different, I apologize.
No, you didn't. I just wanted to clarify because somebody was asked about school taxes or whatever. So those people have been paying school taxes as well as my farm where it is, whatever. Just for full clarification, the reason I'm on this commission, I've been on here 30 years, is because you have to have 3 representatives that live in the 2 mile extraterritorial area on your commission, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So I'm representing those people, and I've taken that job very seriously for over 30 years. And it's very important to me that they be recognized, that they be realized for what they've been doing. You know, I got kind of a kick out of it because you're trying to tie the north, to the north, what Faulkner Township has done. You know, and I think it's very interesting because Faulkner Township has over 90 businesses, 4 housing developments, 248 residents, and over half the land is still prime farmland, and it's farmed. I mean, I don't know, maybe you guys could learn something from Faulkner Township. I don't know. But this whole thing for everybody in the township that I've talked to, I haven't found anybody yet that wants it. I mean, I'm just conveying the wishes of my constituents. And I think it's a very serious issue. A lot of things haven't been brought up that should be brought up. I don't know what else. You know, one of the things that this planning and organization is supposed to do is encourage growth. Am I right? We're supposed to look at orderly growth. You guys have been to, where was it, Fort Dodge and Blair, Nebraska, right? The corn plants there? Can you tell me why, from the 2010 census to the 2020 census, they lost population in both cities? I thought this plant would bring people in and make growth. I don't understand that. If you have an answer for me, I'd like to hear it, because this is a census report right from the U.S. Census, and both of those cities lost population. So, you know, growth, you can explain it, Mr.
Sure, I can. Mr. Chair and Mr. Matichak, I can't answer that question. I would say when we went to Fort Dodge and Blair, Nebraska were a little bit different. The similarity were both communities had Cargill wet corn mills. In the city of Blair, which is just north of, I would say it's in the Omaha metro area. So it's strategically located near Omaha. A lot of the workers travel back and forth from Omaha into Blair. Blair is a smaller community, farm community. Not a lot of, they're starting some residential developments, but they really rely upon the workforce shed of the Omaha metro area. In Blair, Nebraska, there is a industrial park that generally Cargill kind of runs. Essentially, it's a wet corn mill with several ancillary business in and around the Cargill facility, just off-site of where the community is. So it's very near where the community is. But I would say that's a distinct rural community that's really relied upon the city of Omaha and that surrounding area to supply workforce. Fort Dodge, Iowa was different. They were located a little further outside of the city of Fort Dodge. They were more like a Tharaldson ethanol plant, Castleton to Fargo, where Fort Dodge was serving it with infrastructure, similar to what Tharaldson is doing, the city of Fargo really serving that area from an infrastructure perspective. Not as far out as the Tharaldson, but further out from the community. They had, again, a Cargill wet corn mill with a South Korean amino acid facility located along there, along with an ethanol facility in that vicinity. I would say with Fort Dodge, both communities are really proud of their industrial developments in their community. Fort Dodge was different. They had in the 80s, they suffered through a lot of economic depression in the fact that they were a meat packing community. That industry left and probably went offshore, I would suspect. This was a big deal for that community that they had been able to replace some of their industry with this Cargill wet corn mill, and again, that South Korean amino acid facility. So both communities said that it's been very good for the community. I can't speak to the population loss in Fort Dodge or in Blair, Nebraska, but I will say Fort Dodge was quite appreciative that were able to add some industry because they had some tough decades from 1980 onward.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan.
The only point I wanted to make was that we're always talking about growth with this factory, and I just wanted to point out that the two cities that had them actually lost growth in 10 years. So I'm not going to say it was because of the corn plant, but they lost population. We can leave it at that, Mr.
I would just
Phelan.
add-
We can argue all night about it, but that's fine.
I'm not going to argue.
Okay.
But I will say what I did see. I did see in Blair, Nebraska, the mayor took us around along with the city administrators. They pointed out housing development that were occurring in their community, and they did mention they were trying to keep some of the employees within Blair, Nebraska. I would say the other thing we heard about Blair, Nebraska, they had a private college that shut down too from the 1980s onward, and they were looking at how to redevelop it. I think when we left both communities, you know what we found? We should be very proud of the community that we live in. We have a lot going for us in our community, and when we looked at those communities were terrific, but we have so much going for us. It's quite incredible, and it's quite humbling that we live where we do live.
Thanks, Mr. Phelan. Mr. Brooks, did you have anything else? I guess I'll...
Mr. Brooks, I got a question. On your bullet point F there, the economic impact, and there was a spreadsheet that laid out the costing of the annexations should the plant move forward. Has there been any kind of study done if it does the annexation in those properties that are along 81, if for some reason it doesn't, what the impact would be if they were annexed and the costing to that, so that's known? And again, just some scenarios both ways. I haven't seen anything to that. Is there?
So, yeah, I'm not aware of a different costing on, you're saying if Fufeng or the plant didn't come, whoever, would the right side or the left side change versus the right side of the annexation special assessments?
Left, right side, whatever.
Yeah.
What would the cost be to those property owners that would have now been annexed, that are existing there?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that part, should something, not be able to move forward.
Chair Wasvik and Mr. Schumacher. I'll have Mr. Hodak talk about the property tax implications. He did that study. If you recall the special assessments part of it, we have that large spreadsheet on the left side is really the state, City of Grand Forks funding. On the right side of the spreadsheet is where we would special assess. What we've committed to is that the City of Grand Forks, working with the state of North Dakota on the drinking water side, which would provide not only drinking water but fire protection, since it's going to be serviced by City of Grand Forks Fire. What we're looking at is we're currently got preliminary approval for a 60% cost share from the North Dakota State Water Commission to put in city-sized water mains, so the state would pay 60% of that. The city would dedicate paying the 40%, so we would likely take out a drinking water SRF loan, which is like up to 30-year loan, 2% interest, and then the ratepayers throughout the Grand Forks would pay for that 40% cost share. That's how we would pay for that. On the sanitary sewer side, what we've done is, again, the state of North Dakota has, due to this current federal infrastructure program, the state of North Dakota received money for water and wastewater funding. And so right now, we're going to plan to take out a clean water SRF loan to put in the sanitary sewer system, to include that collection system. 49% of that collection system can be forgivable loans. And what our argument is, and what we talked to the adjacent property owners in that area, they're on septic systems. And so really the goal of the county and the state is to try to, when possible, to get systems that are sanitary based in an enclosed system like you have in the city of Grand Forks. And so we're going to argue that it's in environmental best interest to have them hook up to the city sewer and to make it as affordable as possible. And how you make things affordable is that you forgive the loan. The other 51%, we're going to work with Fufeng on paying that remaining 51% on the sanitary sewer collection. So I think on the drinking water side and the clean water, or on the sanitary side, it's not going to change whether on this annexation, whether Fufeng comes in or not. We've created many areas around the city that we've called strategic infrastructure growth areas, and we're going to do something similar. So not only are we going to make it greenfield ready, we're going to make it infrastructure ready in those areas. The other piece is that stormwater pond, and we probably will downsize that stormwater pond if Fufang doesn't come in right away, because we're not sure what kind of size of pond. Right now, we have that cost shared between Fufang and the city of Grand Forks. We'd have to work out how we're going to serve it with that stormwater pond. We have further dedicated that we would pay for those stormwater trunk lines as part of our prairie dog infrastructure funds that we get. The state gives to cities like Grand Forks. We expect to get about $12 million in prairie dog funds that we're going to apply as part of that infrastructure, just because oil prices. We're going to meet it across the finish line and get our full 12 million. The last piece is that 27th Avenue North, and we've met with a lot of the property owners, that street really does need to be upgraded. Right now, it's an arterial or section line road, so we're going to pay 80% of the street itself and the associated stormwater infrastructure. That 20% would be assessed to the property owners regardless if Fufang comes in too. So that 20% I think is going to carry through also. The final piece is that flood protection specials, and those were set up in the in 3 phases. I recall we did assessments, and they were set up so that when property becomes annexed, then those specials hit those properties. So that's a big deal, not only on this project, but whatever developments we work on, those are probably the biggest hits. If you look at how Fargo did it in their area, and if we could go back in time, I'd do this, if we could get a city council to approve. Fargo and Cass County did a sales tax, so nobody, when you annex property in Fargo, nobody gets hit with future flood specials, because we're all paying for it if you go down to Fargo, where the city of Grand Forks used a portion of the future special assessment for properties that are within the flood protection district, however, we're not ready to be annexed. So with that, I think if you ask before or after, we may look at adjustments on how that wastewater lift station is designed. If we don't know if Fufang's coming in, we may downsize that pump station, just because the city of Grand Forks pays for that. So we may make some adjustments. The property owners won't know the difference, other than they're hooked up in a different way to the sanitary sewer system. That storm pond may be reconfigured too, and we'll have to look at that. But generally, we are planning to serve that. Mr. Brooks had the sheet on there, points for sanitary sewer hookup, for drinking water hookup, for fire protection. We plan to serve all those adjacent property owners in this and that Fufang site along the way too. And
So as you
I don't know if Mr. Hodak can
culminate
talk.
all those points, would you say that with or without Fufang, the cost would be fairly the same?
Yeah, I would say with one.
To the existing property
Yeah.
owners along Highway 81?
I think the answer is yeah, and I'll give you a but. I think the but is that stormwater pond. Right now, we have Fufang in the city paying for that stormwater pond right now. And if they don't come in, we'd probably have to figure out what kind of a size of a pond do we need. And if Fufang is not there to help pay for it, and we don't want to assess those property owners, we'd have to figure out, hey, how are we going to construct it? How are we going to design it? And then how are we going to pay for it? I would say that's the one exception to the rule that we'd have to work through.
Can I just clarify that?
Miss Sandy?
Can you just, so what you're saying is if there's an annexation and Fufang doesn't come, the costs will be the same to the property owners as if Fufang does come? There's no savings to the property owners in their special assessments with the Fufang project tied to it?
I think there'll be a savings with the stormwater pond for them, because right now we have the city and Fufang paying for that stormwater detention pond. We've really committed to the water and the sanitary sewer, that the city is going to pay for that system. But I would say the one exception is that stormwater pond. We'd have to work through those particulars. We would likely, if it doesn't come in, we wouldn't build a wastewater pump station to serve 3 to 4 million gallons per day. We would probably serve it in more of an interim wastewater lift station fashion, so we could serve those adjacent property owners without building a big lift station. Right now, the city in a new development pays for a wastewater lift station. We pay for the force main. It's really the first in infrastructure to help serve an area, so it would be no different than what we've done in other areas.
Thanks.
Thank you. So did I hear you correct? You were saying that there is a cost share on the water and the sewer that you anticipate getting. You're not sure if you're going to get that or not?
Right now, on the drinking water side, we've gotten preliminary approval from the State Water Commission and we need to get final approval here in the next week or so for that 60% cost share. On the sanitary sewer side, on the clean water, we have to work with the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality to get that. But as part of this development, what we've really committed is working with the state of North Dakota is that we're going to do everything we can to get that cost share. However, if we're not successful, what we've said is that the city will bear the burden of if something doesn't quite work out the way. We're not going to come back to the property owners and say, you know what, we didn't get this cost share. So
Well, you're coming back to every property owner in Grand
Yeah.
Forks then for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd all have to pay for it.
So we'd have to figure that out. But I think on the sanitary sewer collection side, the city already pays per policy. We pay for the pump station, we pay for the force main. The collection system is the one where, you know, we're going to take out a clean water SRF loan for 30 years at 2%, but we think we have a good case to have it forgivable for the 49% for this adjacent area that's already built out and really probably needs upgrading of the sanitary sewer.
So if we annex it now and it doesn't happen, when do we start, or if we annex it now, when do you start construction on the stormwater sewer?
Yeah, we would, Mr. Reichert, we would start, we're going to be in final design probably through this fall. Likely those projects would be bid over this winter, so either for spring, summer construction of next year.
Okay. And as far as fire protection, is there anything special needed? Any special equipment needed for this plant from the fire department's perspective?
Yep, Mr. Reichert, that's a very good question. We are planning to serve this from our North Columbia station. And so what we think right now is obviously the water mains I think in that area are going to be 8 or 16-inch water mains. They're going to have fire hydrants. So we're going to have all the things you would see in an urban setting. I think the only thing that we're also working with Fufang on is it is an industrial site, is that there might be some special equipment we may ask them as part of our public safety study that we're conducting to ensure that we have proper training, we have proper equipment, gear, all those sorts of things to help serve them. But from additional firefighters, no, we don't anticipate any additional firefighters. We don't anticipate a new fire station, that we are strategically located to already serve that industrial park area.
Thank you. Anyone else from the commission have any questions? I mean, we're just kind of getting to learn it and getting ourselves acclimated with all this, I suppose. I mean, we've all seen a lot, but anyone?
There was a note in the material we got that there was meetings with all those involved in the annexation. Can you give an overview of those meetings and how, you know,
Yep.
where the people sit?
Well, yeah, we didn't get to all of them. I'll start off by saying that it was probably down to less than 10 that had not gotten to. But there is a wide range of opinions out there. I think for the most part, we didn't have anybody already requesting it, other than there might be one that was going to be soon asking for us to come, so because they wanted to develop on their property. So there was one individual. I don't think that they didn't want to stand up and raise their hand and say that, yes, we wanted this. But for the most part, I think there was some that are probably wishing this came about 5 years ago, because they just made upgrades to their septic systems and could have really used it then. But at this point, we've let them know as well that we wouldn't be forcing them to abandon that septic. They can wait until they're starting to have issues and then hook up. There's some that are pumping out their some of their issues now, and some of that happens fairly often, and that probably will relieve them from having to do that. So some of the businesses have more people than others up there using the facilities, which then could potentially cause issues. So there's a wide range. I wouldn't say that there was a collective one person had the same issues as everybody else. And that included how we talked with utilities and what utilities would maybe cause a benefit sooner rather than later. In addition, I will say there is a savings, although it's difficult to know for sure what it is today fire protection. So we know now, Manville Fire, I think, does a heck of a job, but they are a volunteer fire department, and they come a distance. And we've seen that in other areas recently, that it just takes longer, right, with any volunteer fire department, that the fire service will increase, and our fire department will be the first to tell you too, a lot of what they do is medical calls. So this area will come into our area. They're just over a mile from this area as they come up Columbia Road from that station. So it's going to be that's going to improve, and there could be savings on their insurance as well. We did ask, if anybody had found out what those numbers were. They hadn't as of yet, any of the businesses that we talked to. But that was something that we did share with them. But I wouldn't say there was a collective unified voice that we heard of what the benefits or negatives would be to them.
That was good. It was one of them, I was at the meeting, and full disclosure, it was one of the better meetings. I mean, everybody got to state their piece and get out on the table what our frustrations were as owners in that area. And maybe we didn't get everything answered, but at least we all got to throw it out there together because we all own out there. Mr. Reichert?
Yeah, looking at the spreadsheet that you provided, are the specials that they're going to be assessed on here? Or is this just what their ongoing increase in taxes is going to be?
So, yeah, if you're on the right one, there's one for special assessments, and then there's one for taxes.
Okay.
So if you're on the link for special assessment, that one's a little bit more colorful. Our assessing department didn't have nearly as many colors as our engineering department did, but the reason I will say the engineering department did that, so those vertical lines, they did try to bring together what those costs would be, because there's some owners that had multiple parcels, so to try to help them collect what those totals would be. And then as you look at the far right of that sheet, there's an estimated yearly, and then there's a total that's just to the left of that.
And then do we have a total number of what it will cost the residents of Grand Forks if we annex this, and what it will cost if Fufeng comes and if they don't come?
So that would be the left side is what city and state would pick up. That would be the left side. So there's the main bold. There's a total amount that's not broken out between city and state yet, because we're still arriving at some of those figures. So.
And that assumes we get these grants?
Yes, and I defer if that, yeah.
And is it more or less likely that we get those grants if Fufeng does not come?
Mr. Phelan.
Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Reichert, I think the argument is, I think, positive on both sides. I think there's plenty of arguments either way, but I think it certainly is easier if Fufeng does come in. It is not only a local project, but it's been a state-supported project, and I think it'd be an easier argument for us to make for the state to partner with us since the project started at the state of North Dakota. And I think with the adjacent property owners, we wanted to do everything we can to bring them into the city in a way that we would serve them, but at as least cost possible, knowing that that was an issue as we met with all of them. But I think the final answer is it's probably easier, but I think there's good arguments either way.
Good questions, Mr. Reichert.
Mike as well, Steve.
What's that?
Mike. Sorry.
Usually you can hear me without it.
Yeah.
Good question, Mr. Reichert. So, kind of some housekeeping stuff. We're going to have to, the information's there, we're going to have to break it up and vote on it. There isn't a public hearing. We do take comments, public comments, I think, to help us. We're a voluntary board, appointed board, so, we're all here on our own time. So, at this point, do we want to break up the stuff and start platting it off, or do we want to hear from some of the residents, or do we want to, Mr. Reichert, or Mr. Matichek, I was looking at Alex and
Thanks. I just want to know, Mr. Brooks, please tell me, when the last time we had an annexation, all of this process, we didn't have a public hearing and we didn't have a vote on it with this commission?
So you asked me that the other night too. Public hearing means something different, so the planning commission has never done public
Come
hearings.
on, be careful here.
They've never done public hearings for annexations. We've always done public comment. So, and I think that's what Steve's saying, is that he would take public comment, but public hearings are where we mail out notices, and no, we haven't done that.
When was the last time we did though?
I'm not aware of us ever doing that. I've been here 15 years.
I was chairman of this commission for 2 years. We had public hearings on every annexation that came through here. If you want to go back and look it up, and just, anybody want to agree with me or disagree with me, you can.
I don't remember enough, Frank, to make sure, you know what, I don't want to say I agree or disagree, because I can't remember exactly.
Well, when was the last annexation we had? Annexations pretty much have been voluntary. The contractors or the developers want to get annexed to get the services, and that's fine. They usually get, but we usually had a public hearing on it, or whatever you want to call it, in case the neighbors or somebody else in the area did not want that. You know that's happened over the years.
You're incorrect, Frank. We always have the annexation at the preliminary plat stage, and the preliminary...
I agree with that.
And
we've always had a public hearing and a vote on it.
Always, we do, at the final plat and final rezoning is when we do public hearings, and the annexation only comes through us once during preliminary.
It only comes through the first time. You got to have the plat and the replat and the replat, the plat and the zoning has to come through twice.
And
Preliminary tonight, final at the next planning and zoning meeting. I realize that.
Okay.
But the annexation has always been tied to the first one. And in my recollection, I'm getting old, so maybe I'm not right, but I've always remembered us having a public hearing on that and a vote on that annexation. And it's usually not controversial, okay?
yeah, we've done some controversial ones. I mean,
That was years ago, though.
yeah, it's been a bit, but yeah, not a public hearing. But that being said, you know, I'm not suggesting that we don't take public comment, but in terms of mailing the notices and placing it in the paper, that those are done, but it's done at the governing body, which is the city council. They do those, so.
And, you know, they could have acted without us, and I appreciate that they kicked it back to us, let our commission, although we're not a governing body, look at it, provide our recommendations. I think that showed a little bit on our side. They wanted to hear our input, so. Mr. Reichert?
I guess I was looking for some numbers, and this property owner called me, and so won't mind to think that I use their name, but if we look at saying at $861,000 for the assessment covered by the city and state. So if we annex and Fufeng doesn't come in, they still won't have to pay that $845,000 in special assessment?
Mr. Reichert and Mr. Waswick, as I've briefed this to the city council a few times, so everything on that spreadsheet, the city council is aware of, but it's going to require final action of the city council once we have all the information, whether it's from the state. But right now, I've discussed with them and argued with them, and I haven't got any pushback that on the drinking water side and on the sanitary sewer side, that we would hold up our commitment regarding both of those. I feel confident on the drinking water side. We have gotten preliminary approval of that. We still need to work through the clean water side with the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality on that forgivable 49%. But I'm relatively confident with that. But we have held out that we've discussed with all the property owners that wanted to meet with us, and we've made our commitment. And I have made it with the really big asterisk that ultimately the city council needs to be final approval. But I have said that discussion.
And in that case then, the city of Grand Forks could be on, the citizens could be on the hook for 18.6 million. That's the total of that number in that column. If we annex and Fufeng doesn't come, and you've promised these property owners that you will do the right thing, then the city as a whole, each citizen would have to pay their share of 18.6 million.
Well, I think if Fufang doesn't come in, we would look at how we're going to serve those areas, and some of those costs that are embedded in there include serving Fufang. And so as I talked about, designing things, whether it's sanitary sewer side, whether it's drinking water, we may downsize some of the engineering as part of that. So those numbers are going to change if Fufang doesn't come in. We have to make a determination. We're going to certainly serve that adjacent property owners with the appropriate infrastructure, whether it's water or sanitary, but we may not engineer it to that level, not knowing that if Fufang isn't coming in and we don't know what the next industry is, we won't do exactly what that spreadsheet is saying.
What happens if we delay this annexation by 1 month? What happens if we delay it by 2 months to the project?
I think the property owners would have to discuss that along with Fufang. My understanding in talking with both groups is they want to close on the property so that they can move forward and finalize that transaction. So I think the annexation does hold up some of that transaction because both parties would like to move forward. And part of that moving forward is having some sort of indication that it's going to get through planning and zoning, the land's going to get through city council, so they have some better assurity on their project moving forward.
The problem is we can't unannex something. Once we make this decision and we decide to annex, I assume, and I've asked this before, we can't unannex something, can we?
I'd defer to Mr. Gosta. The mayor and I have talked about, and with the property owners, some of the property owners are here. I see Mr. Bridgeford's here and the Adams are here. And, they've been terrific to work with. And if it didn't move forward and suddenly they're, that 370 acres is annexed into the city, number one, speaking with with our assessing department, they would probably, even if it got what he indicated, Paul Hodak indicated to me as our city assessor, is that even if it got changed into I2 or in some sort of industrial zoning, he would still say that it's functioning as agricultural land. He would assess the value at that.
Yeah, I'm not terribly concerned about that land. I mean, if that land remains agriculture, it's the 18.6 million that we're committing to, hoping we can get some state funding, hoping we can get some city funding, hoping we get funding from Fufang, versus how much does it screw up the project? How much does it slow it down? How much what is the other side? I can see from your chart, talk to the business owners what that side is. What's the impact on the project?
Yep. I would have to ask the owners, both who own it now and who would like to close on the property, how that impacts their.
Can I just ask that? So would it be possible to, it's my understanding that the landowners need annexation in order to close on the land purchase. Is that correct?
My understanding is that it's a key part of them closing on this particular property.
So what if would it work for them as the property owners to be able to close their sale if we make the annexation contingent on Fufang being built, or Fufang being further down the road, or being, getting the answers to these questions that you have, so they know that if they get what they need, then the annexation will go through. If they don't, then we don't have to put this burden on the city and the business owners. Allowing them to close, the best of both worlds, allowing them to close their property transaction, but still having some safety for us.
I know Eric.
And that was Ms. Sandy's idea, by the way, not mine. Because I think it's a really good one.
But nobody's ever stopped us from making a motion on an annexation, and we're a recommendation only.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever stopped us from making a motion on an annexation to add anything in there we see fit.
No.
Am I wrong, Mr. Gosted?
You're not wrong. And just to make sure that from a timing perspective, and it kind of goes to what Mr. Brooks talked about, the procedure here, and it might impact how things play themselves out a little bit, or might impact your question, because it's a great question. That you'd make your recommendation to the city council, and at that point, the city council has to then adopt a resolution to annex this area. They could take the entire map and say all of it. They could make it smaller. They could even make it bigger.
Can they make it contingent on something?
That I haven't looked at,
Yeah.
but I wanted, but I want to make sure that you understand that after that resolution comes down, then the city council is required to send a notice out 7 days after the resolution to all the property owners that are within that annexation area. That's the first step. They also have to publish notice of the resolution and publish notice of a hearing date as to when protests can be submitted. That has to be published once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. 15 days before that hearing, they have to provide notice to all the landowners. They have to provide that notice of the hearing and advise them that the protests have to be in writing. So you have that public hearing in front of the governing body. And they also have to provide notice to the county and the township that would be affected by this. That's the process. So I think you could make that recommendation if you wanted to do that kind of a contingency. I don't know how that would impact the closing between the 2 landowners. I don't know if that would satisfy that contingency, because I haven't seen the.
Because they want some assurance that this is going to happen, right, before they invest a bunch of money. So if we say, look, as long as you guys can get everything together and you can get it right, we're saying we will approve the annexation. Is that enough for them to close their land?
Yeah, and I don't know what the terms of their agreement.
They're here, right?
They are, but I haven't reviewed it, and I don't know what that might mean to them. And 2, I haven't researched that particular issue. And I think between now and the time the city council meets, it would give me that opportunity to provide that legal guidance to the city council, because that is a relevant question to ask, and can that be made a part of the resolution? And so you could make that recommendation to the council to say, this is what we're considering, and ask the council to review it to make it a part of their resolution or not.
That's what I'm
Does that
thinking.
make sense?
We made
I'm not trying to punt, I'm just.
that.
Mr. Phelan,
We should kick it up the hill.
would we know where we are with the state and federal funding at that point?
We will, Mr. Riker, will know on the drinking water side by next week on that 60% cost share on serving them with drinking and fire protection water. I'm not sure when the Department of Environmental Quality meeting, that's coming up too. I'd have to look at the timeframes, but that's another meeting that's coming up here in this springtime era too.
We could turn some of our maybes into yeses and nos, then we'd be fine. I didn't see you.
That's okay.
Ms. Harrell, please.
I'm talking behind your back. Okay, so as I read through the documents as well, there's also some contingency funds or escrow funds, if you will, that the Fufang has provided. Could some of those funds, because as I understand it, if the deal falls through, there's still cash there that they are responsible to pay some of the incurred costs to sort of navigate each of these phases. So is that something that we could use from that escrow to sort of, yeah, we agree to annex you, however, if this falls through, you're on the hook for, such and such?
I can answer that question, Ms. Farrell. The way the development agreement is set up is there are certain costs and expenses for studies and reviews and permitting that we've going to be expending, and there's a letter of credit that's being offered up so that if this doesn't go forward, then we've got the letter of credit to cover those costs. That's one component of it. The escrow account that you're referring to deals with the proportionate share of Fufang for some wastewater improvements and also for the raw water infrastructure. They are front-loading that with they're going to pay for their proportionate costs with those escrow funds. Those would be deposited at the time the project is going forward, and at the time we do the contract. That's I can't remember the time frame, but shortly after that contract is bid out. There are, if for some reason the development becomes impossible, like an act of God, those type of things, where it becomes, they just couldn't build it, then those funds get returned to them. But those funds are dedicated to that infrastructure component.
Can we add a contingency to a contingency?
Right? Good question.
So when the flood assessments come in, we all had a, 20-year AM, 30-year AM on those. Will these new property owners, I think that 20-year AM's up, will they be due tomorrow, or will they get a new 20-year AM on theirs?
No, Mr. Wasvik and Mr. Record, that's one more thing the city has agreed to, subject to city council approval. Right now, they'd be 20-year payment plans. Right now, what we've offered, just because on the drinking water and the sanitary side, those are going to be 30-year loans, just because they're 50-plus year assets that we're doing, so we're going to take out the full 30 years at 2%. We've also agreed to extend the 20 years to 30 years, so we're going to get set aside a 30-year payment plan for this particular area for them.
On their specials?
On their specials.
And on their flood. So 30 on the specials, 20 on the flood?
No, 30 now. We've extended it to 30 years.
On both?
On both.
Okay. So the 7 million that they're looking at, minus the amount of Fufeng is paying, that would be a 30-year AM for them?
Yes, for all infrastructure that gets assessed, including the flood protection.
Mr. Gosted?
Yeah, one other item that as I was writing down my note as to what to research, one of the things to be mindful of is that in that development agreement, there are all kinds of conditions that have to be satisfied in advance of anything being done. So if we put in a, condition about annexation, it would almost be, you'd have to tie it into the conditions that are set forth in that development agreement, right? Because if they don't satisfy certain conditions, the development may not occur, and then the annexation, so that we could be talking, we will be talking a significant period of time before that annexation would occur, just so that the planning and zoning is aware that if you're going to put in a condition about annexation upon development, we have to satisfy all the conditions in the development agreement before anything can be done as well.
And then the elephant in the room, do we know if there's going to be a vote or not?
Maureen Storstad is reviewing the matter, and I understand that a decision will be made by the end of the week.
The one way I'm looking at it, you voted me back in to vote on this thing, of where I sit, at least we tell city council our recommendation. And I think it's for the landowners and the people, business owners out there, gives us something to say, okay, what the heck if? And that's been a huge question for all of us out there, is if thing falls through, are we on the hook? I like it. Miss Sandy.
So what is the expectation? What are you looking for from us tonight? Just a recommendation? Do we need to?
Well, we need to vote on.
Make a motion?
We need to split this thing up. We need to split this thing up. We need to vote on the plat. We need to vote on the zoning, and then we need to vote on the annexation.
Vacation, you missed that one.
Vacation,
Yep.
the vacate. I always vote yes on a vacation. I need
Right.
one.
Can you,
So that's what, I think at this point, that was kind of letting all of us
Yep.
get through anything we had, and it's great conversation and excellent ideas came out of this. I'm probably going to call on Jane to start reading them in and taking
Yep.
them one at a time now.
can I ask
Talking about-
one
yeah, go ahead.
more
You-
question then?
Absolutely.
Can you show us the property that there's some sort of a no annexation agreement on?
See how it goes.
It'd be on the Corinta-owned property
Yeah.
in this area, through here.
Well, you don't have it on the screen.
Let me share it out. So it'd be south of 27th, between 42nd and Columbia Road. It would be this, what's in white, if you can see that. It's kind of hard to see. It does include the coulee here, so there's some undevelopable pieces through here, because it's lowland, and There's ponding easements there for the flood protection, so I think you could, the majority of this area is probably, there's nothing there. But the Corintas, I can do a measurement too on the area.
I think I just,
And this is the area that is
that's what I
not
wanted
going
see
to
where
be
it was,
annexed.
how far it went down.
Yep. I'll run across just because that lot's included as well, so obviously you can see I'm not getting it precise, but
According to Onyx, it's about 220 acres.
That's all.
Okay.
yeah, 5,750 square feet, and for those who are quicker than me, can do some math on that.
So, size of what
I just hate to do an annexation and leave.
an island?
132 acres. And
I'm
it-
sorry, what was it?
132 acres.
So is that something else that could be looked at, what the duration of that agreement is? I can't imagine that it would be ongoing. I guess I don't know.
I haven't seen the agreement.
Yeah.
I
But I'd like to, if we're going to say contingent, recommend contingent on Fufang, then perhaps they could also look at including that in the annexation. And by that, I guess it's looking at whatever agreement was signed.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to take a look at whatever the terms of that particular non-annexation agreement is, the way I'm hearing it, and what the
Yeah.
duration is, but
Because isn't a lot of their land included in the sale?
Corintas?
Yeah?
No, none.
Oh, none, okay,
None.
okay.
No, they only own south of 27th, and this site's completely to the north. Up in this area, just to the north of it.
Mr. Bucky.
So I had just a couple questions that I wrote down here. So, and sorry to keep skipping around, but you mentioned earlier like the snow plowing on North Washington, right? Like how
Yep.
it's not part of the city, but in fact, the city plow crews are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens with the fire now? Because you mentioned this is in Manville's fire district, whatever.
Correct, yeah.
So if there is a fire call, I mean, do the Grand Forks firefighters get there first? Do they
Oh, what
respond at
happens
all?
now
Yeah.
while it's outside of city limits?
Right, right.
So, and fire chief isn't here, but as I understand it, they get there for a safety reason to see if they can assist on getting anybody out of the building, but they will not fight the fire.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Because it's outside of city limits, but
I would say technically, we shouldn't be plowing to the diversion, but my guess is that we have a very good public works department. And back in the day, what I understand, talking to the supervisor, when the diversion got built and constructed, essentially we took over 81 or North Washington to the diversion, and then we turn around and then somebody else comes from the north. So obviously it was just pragmatic equipment operators that made a good informal deal, and it's been worked ever since. And I just happened to ask, and they say, "Oh yeah, we've been plowing that since it got constructed," which makes sense.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing I wrote down here was more specific to the PUD item and the wastewater specifically. So in some of the support materials, I think there was this risk matrix was perhaps the title of it. But odor was one of them, right? And the most likely source of odor is the wastewater treatment, right? On the corn milling site. And then when we kind of check that against the PUD, that area that corresponds to exception area B, I believe, right? So I guess just a couple of thoughts or observations on that. That means that there's wastewater treatment happening on the site, right? There's a pond, like an open air pond or lagoon there, I assume.
Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Budke, this has been an important part of it. We are going to treat, they're going to discharge about 3 million gallons per day of wastewater to the city of Grand Forks. That's a lot of wastewater. For example, J.R. Simplet's about 2 million gallons per day. So they're going to use about 6 million gallons per day of raw water that we're working with the state of North Dakota on another 60% cost share. But they're going to ultimately discharge about 3 million gallons, so there'll be a lot of evaporation in their process and that sort of thing. We are working at alternatives, and so the important part of what we're doing right now, we're working with A2S, which is a really good local regional firm. We're also working with Black & Veatch, which is an international engineering firm, just to make sure we review what they're planning to do on a pretreatment side. With an industrial user like this, what the city's requirements are is that you got to pre-treat your wastewater before you discharge it to the public treatment works.
Sure.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to treat it. So what they're going to plan to do with their 3 million gallons, and we're reviewing the design of what they're doing, they're going to treat it to at or below domestic limits, strength limits.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we're reviewing what their pretreatment strategy is. I think much of it will be enclosed. They're going to look at an aerobic system. So like J.R. Simplet, if you drive out north of J.R. Simplet, they have an anaerobic system out there, so it's enclosed and it's without air.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to propose an aerobic system, and so whether it will be all closed or not, or will it, what kind of oxygenation will it have? We're reviewing all those things, but the bottom line is this: wastewater pretreatment system can be a source of odors, and so what we're doing as part of our review to ensure whatever they're going to plan to construct, that it will not be odor producing as part of that treatment. So we've been doing a lot of third-party due diligence on that system.
Okay. So related to that same question then is just the location on the site. And I don't bring this up to like micromanage the design, but other parts of the city or the community, I guess, where we have ponds, right, for treatment, they're much farther out. They're like 2 or 3 miles out of away from this site. And this sounds like it's probably slightly different, but it's also significantly closer to, the residential and commercial areas of the city. So, like, is there an interest in saying the exception area where there's wastewater treatment should happen elsewhere on the site that's a little, further out? Again, not to micromanage, but just to move it farther away.
Sure. Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Butt, very good question. So we've had those conversations as part of it. Right now, if you look at where that lot for the stormwater pond is, that's in and around that area. It's going to be city property. We're going to put a wastewater lift station in that area. Adjacent to that area will be their pretreatment system, so kind of on the upper half of that area, further east. And so we've talked about how can we move that further as far west as possible.
Okay.
But anything open to the air, we're going to have some strict scrutiny so that there are no odors. So, whether it's we're obviously going to have a stormwater pond that's going to have stormwater system, but on their treatment system, if there's something that's going to be open to the air, it cannot be odor producing as part of the design.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good questions, Mr. Riker.
I'm going to ask you a question that might be unfair, and I don't want to if you don't have an answer to it, that's fine, but it's something I just want to make sure you're aware of. Are you aware of the city of Dayton suing Cargill over their corn milling plant and the settlement that they had over the odors and the sewer discharge?
I am not, Mr. Riker.
Okay, because I'm just looking at an article here. They had a $1.5 million settlement against Cargill, 3 to 4 million gallons of wastewater going into the city sewer. 41 violation, took them years to do it because of the odors and what it did to the sewer system. So that was a Cargill plant, but it was a wet corn milling plant.
Yep. Mr. Riker, I think it highlights the importance of all that we're working on right now, because this is it's serious business. It's a serious industry, and we have to have it done right. And when we talk to the Fufang group, and including this week, they want to find win-wins. They want to bring a plant here that'll be state-of-the-art and not let anybody down in this community.
Okay.
They know the pressure's on them.
Well, but the consequences are on us. I mean, we got to be worried about making this city nicer, not just bigger. So.
I think other industries are looking at improvements. Simplot's going to make some improvements to their pretreatment system. So when we meet with Fufang, we're looking at redundancy, how much capacity, can you really get below domestic limits, all those things that we're having professionals that deal with this, not only in the wastewater industry, the folks at Black and Beach have been part of designs or have helped support communities from a wet corn milling perspective too. So we have some real professionals here that are reviewing this.
Mr. Matichak? Yeah, thank you. This may or may not be relevant, but could you give me an update on the Red River Refinery plant? Because that's a $100 million plant, according to EDC, that's supposed to be the shining star of the community. And I don't know about you, but it's one of the smelliest places in Grand Forks. And I don't even know if they're functional anymore. So can you give me an update of what's going on with those guys? Because they're going to be within a half mile of this plant.
Mr. Wasvik and Mr. Matichak, I can certainly give you an update on that. I think when we look back to the Corinta annexation, really Red River Biorefinery was part of that. We wanted to move forward with Red River Biorefinery. The Corintas, we'll look at the documents. They wanted to protect their other areas so that it all didn't come in and get annexed. I think to Fufang's credit right now, they're willing to annex all 370 acres. And I'm going to say that's pretty extraordinary. For an industry to come into town and be willing to subject themselves to the whole cost of their whole site. On the Red River Biorefinery, they are shut down right now, and they have had some challenges. There's no doubt about it. I think one of the difference with Red River Biorefinery versus this wet corn milling, Red River Biorefinery, we're trying to bring in some European technology into our community. They tried to start up and, construct and design and start up during the pandemic. They could not get their professionals here from Europe due to the shutdown. I think as part of that, so that it has not been a well-run startup, and everyone knows that. But it has been a significant investment. They are a strategic partner to American Crystal Sugar. They're a strategic partner to J.R. Simplot. One of the unique parts of when they were trying to bring that is that they wanted to use some of the offtake of American Crystal Sugar and J.R. Simplot, and it's a really great concept as to try to use some of their materials that are going to be land applied or whatever else. Well, they've had a rough start, but I think the important part is this: they understand that, they know that, and they are shut down right now, and they are planning to make some improvements in that facility. And those improvements will mainly be in that wastewater pretreatment system. And I think it's likely under-designed. And so they are shut down until they can make those improvements. And they want to make it successful, and we want them to be successful right now. So they have committed to the community. They want to be better. I think we have a meeting with them later this week where they're going to provide some more details of what they're planning in the future, because they want to get that up and running really well. Because groups like that want to make further investments in other agribusiness in our community in and around that same area. So I'll keep providing reports to you and to the city council, but they are shut down, but they're looking to make some additional improvements.
One of the questions that always comes up on these type of industries is solid waste. Not wastewater, but solid waste. And it's my understanding the biorefinery had a big problem with solid waste. Is that correct? I mean, they actually tried to put it in the city sewer and it got caught, right? I mean, I don't know. This is what I've heard. I'd just like to find out. So in the Fufang plant, what are they going to do with the solid waste? How are they going to dispose of it?
That's one of the, Mr. Matichak, that's one of the studies that we're reviewing right now as part of that pretreatment system in the wastewater
But you don't know.
We're reviewing that at this point. Yeah, how many solids? Obviously, when you treat wastewater, you create solids. And so one of the questions is, what are you going to do with those solids? How are you going to, where are you going to place those? And so those are some of the details that we're studying with Fufang at this point in time.
See, that's one of the concerns I have. Are they going to, with having to have 370 acres, which I still never really got an answer, what are you going to do with all that property besides the plant? Is there a possibility that they might be spreading their solid waste on the rest of that property? I don't think it's environmentally possible, but is it something they might do?
Mr. Waswick and Mr. Matichak, I don't think that's part of their plan. I think if you look at the site plan that we've seen, I'm going to say about 2/3 of it will be as part of this development. You know, not only the production part, but some of the ancillary facilities like the wastewater pretreatment. And certainly they have expansion plans beyond what they're going to build, and I anticipate that's what they're looking at as part of that, the remaining parts of the property. I can't imagine, I haven't seen any plans that would be an area where they would try to bury or spread solid waste of any sort.
So can you expand on the expansion plans? Another factory, doubling this size of this one, or what? We ask these questions, we don't get any answers. I'm sure they don't always know either, but you guys must have some kind of an idea what they want to do with the rest of this property.
Yeah.
Because that concerns me. Because once we change the zoning, once they get an I-1 or an I-2, all they have to do is get a building permit, and as long as it's a permitted use, it's a done deal. And I think the citizens and Faulkner Township and all these people have a right to know what's going to happen with the rest of that property. 370 acres is a lot of land. Most of these plants are on 40, 50 acres, 120 acres at the most with the rail spur and the circulation of the rail cars. That still leaves you a lot of property there. And I think that's an unanswered question that I've been asking from day one. What is going to be on the rest of that property? And I still do not have an answer. I had one answer, said green space. Well, okay, maybe, but I think we all are allowed an answer to that question.
Okay. I know that, number one, here's the answer that I've heard regarding that. They're going to produce amino acids, which is the highest value that you can provide in the food industry, so they are going to plan to do that. I suspect in the future, they're going to try to perfect that over the next several years, and then if everything goes well, I would suspect they would want to expand, just like we'd want any other industry to expand, whether it's J.R. Simplot or Philadelphia Macaroni, all these industries to expand. The important part, if you zone it I-2, and they want to expand their facility, they're certainly going to have to get state permits, they're going to have to get city permits, they're going to create water, they're going to need water, they're going to need wastewater, they probably will have air permitting issues, they're going to have to work through the state of North Dakota. Just so if you give it I-2, there's a whole lot of review between the city and the state that's going to happen above and beyond when they want to expand.
If they're annexed, they got to meet all the city codes, which isn't always easy. We don't.
I won't go any further. I think there's more to say about that.
Mr. Riker?
Exception area B, I was going to ask that. So if Fufeng doesn't come and we've designated exception area B as a stormwater sewer area, could the city then just say, hey, it's already a stormwater sewer area, we need some more stormwater sewer, we want to make that a regular stormwater sewer pond? Or a regular sewer pond?
Well, I'd highlight that, I think we have it as private, but that would be, city wouldn't own the property, so it would be, it wouldn't be ours. We'd have to purchase it to do that. And the city has the ability, the public infrastructure side is allowed in lots of areas. So if we were to purchase a piece of property, I think zoning now allows us to do some of those things, just so we're aware. The other thing I think somebody had mentioned, or Frank had mentioned, not to do land applications. We can do that, put that writing in there now. I can't remember, it's probably about 10 years ago or so, we had a request to do some land application of some of the beet product, and we went through some of that discussion. I don't know who would have been here at that time. Might have only been Frank, but that was something that we, I believe that it said no, if I remember correctly.
We agreed at that time not to allow any of the dumping of, I believe it was by Zabral's, I'll pick on somebody here, but it was to not allow that within the 2-mile range to be farmed and worked in for the dumping of tailings or beet pulp.
Yeah,
and that was the decision that the residents wanted, as well as I think some of the land. There was 1 or 2 landowners that wanted it because they were going to profit from it.
Right.
But the rest of them didn't want it, so.
Right, and we could certainly put in here that just no land applications like that would be allowed, and I'd have no issues with that, and I don't think that's their intent, so we should be good there.
So I think at this time, we'll start splitting things up, reading them in, being that part of our business done. We'll go from there. Jane, you want to read in item 4-1?
Yes. Item 4-1, plat of Peony First Re-Subdivision, 3500 27th Avenue North.
Nope, Steve. Come on, I had to. So, this basically is the plat, right? Does Mr. Matichek?
Just a quick question for you, Mr. Chairman. Are you going to allow some comment tonight?
On the items that are addressed?
Okay, thank you.
I was trying to decide how to do it, Frank, to be totally honest. And I thought, well, let's hear, we had to vote on these separate.
I understand that.
Maybe I'm making a
that, yeah.
huge error because I might hear things 3 times, but.
What do you think about taking comment before we vote on anything?
Well, absolutely. I'm going to take some comments.
Okay.
But I want to restrict it. This board has 4 things to do, right? We have the plat. And
Zoning.
we're all part of the commission, so if somebody's got a better idea, that's how I lead. We have the plat, we have the vacation, we have the zoning, and we have the annexation. If somebody wants to speak about either one of them, is my thought, I'd love to hear it. Don't have to, but I want to hear what the residents have to say. Instead of throwing the broad brush out when we have to decide on each issue now. So I want to kind of trim it down to the issues that we have in front of us so we can vote on the issues and then go from there. That's my thought. That's what we'll do. As long as our commission is okay with that. Okay, so 4-1, like I said, it's not a public hearing. We've read it in, we know about it. Does anybody want to step up and talk about 4-1? We would entertain that. Knowing the landowners are here, the group's here, residents are here. The plat. Please state your name for the
Chairman
record.
Waswick and board, my name is Phil Kramer, 2696 Fox Farm Road. I'm a Falconer Township resident. I'm also a Falconer Township supervisor, chairman of the board this year. When I took that position 20-plus years ago, they assured me it was just dealing with barking dogs, potholes, and shot-up road signs. But then we got into the 2-mile zoning issue and some other things with that, and I realized very quickly there's a lot more to it. I guess, I don't know how 4.1 or whatever here, but one of the things I would like to address is you're going to move out the city limits then to the edge of this as you annex these properties into the city. When that occurs, are you going to push out the extraterritorial zoning 2 miles from that new city limits?
Yes.
And how is that happening? Is that something the city does, or is that something that the state legislature has to approve?
Mr. Brooks, could you help answer that question for Mr. Kramer?
We would have to do that through a separate process, so it doesn't automatically go 2 miles, just so everybody's aware. Nope, we have to notify owners if we're going to expand that 2 miles. So as we do this, and we've done some annexations in the last 10 years where we haven't expanded that 2 mile. It's been fixed for that long, so there are a couple areas where it's under 2 mile. That would have to be through another process. At this point, I'm not recommending it, but ultimately that's going to be your recommendation on the city council to do that, but staff isn't proposing that at this time.
That's a good question. Mr.
We don't ever see that, do we?
Yeah, you would, because that would be a zoning. We would have to expand, and then
Have we done that?
When I first started.
Not since we did that.
When I first started, we did it.
Yeah, when we went to 4 mile, we went from 2 to 4 mile, and then we did that, and we had to notify all those property owners, and there's a specific process in state law.
That's definitely under the annexation.
So it's basically 2 miles from whenever we had the last vote, and it doesn't change as we get bigger?
Correct.
Okay.
Till we open it up.
So which chews up a whole bunch more control of my township.
Correct.
Okay.
But it
So-
sounds like that's a separate vote. That's something
Correct,
else.
correct. But we've been an issue over the years of the city with the diversion ditch. We never got to say much about that. It just got stuck in and got improved without us. We had to fight tooth and nail to get guardrails on the crossing on North Columbia Road. So we've not had a good neighbor policy, and, you know, the city council changes, the people in the city offices change, okay? And they have a short memory. So it's not in writing and it's not down in the city minutes or whatever, our township seems to get screwed. I'm sorry to put it that way, but that's the way it's been. If they push the zoning out even farther You know, we've had an issue with variances on permitting required in that 2-mile zone. The township has not been notified about that. That's our township people out there, not just the city interests there. There's also township interests there. We've got aced out of that. You know, we've been making comments as we go, but has anybody come to the township and asked for our input for this development? Not one iota. Nothing. I can understand why we're a little ticked off. And some of the residents also. It feels like it's getting shoved down our throat. We're not happy. Unfortunately, it may be pushed, and there's not much we can do about it. I can't do anything about the annexation of the individual property owners. I don't have a dog in that fight, unfortunately. I can't. I could address a couple things. The Manville Fire Department has a satellite station at the corner of 54th and North Columbia Road to service the north end of Grand Forks. That's our Falconer Township Hall. We've graciously let them use that so they could service this end of town. Now, if you annex them in and they can provide no fire protection, the city of Grand Forks can only come out and provide safety. They can't fight fires because they don't have tankers and tanker trucks to fight that. So what are you going to do in the interim if you annex in all these owners and the fire department in Grand Forks is not going to be able to service them? Manville Township, Manville Fire Department built a beautiful facility in Manville that they're paying a stiff mortgage on right now. If they lose all these businesses along North 81 that are not paying the fire taxes to support Manville Fire Station, they're probably going to have to renege on their mortgage. Or they're going to have to charge everybody else in that north end an extremely higher rate for fire coverage. Agassiz Water Users provides water service to the edge of town. I think almost everybody on North 81 uses Agassiz Water. They've got a lot of money invested in infrastructure up there, and I'm assuming that when they are next in, that's all for naught. Has anybody talked to Agassiz Water about how they're going to be reimbursed, or if they're going to be reimbursed for the infrastructure that they have invested in the north end of town, and now it's all for naught? I haven't heard anything about that.
Mr. Veland, would you like to address that?
I could address that. We are working with Agassiz Rural Water and partnering quite well. We do have an agreement with Agassiz Rural Water on buying out any customers. And so we're working through all the particulars. The city of Grand Forks, one of the Agassiz Rural Water lines goes pretty much dead center through the Fufang site. And so we're working with them to move that more adjacent to the adjacent properties. The city has committed to paying for that, moving that line. Agassiz Rural Water thinks they're bidding it right now, and we're going to come up with a reimbursement mechanism to pay them. They think it's going to be in and around $30,000 that we've committed to. Longer term, when we put in the larger mains, we're going to work out all the particulars through our agreement. And if there's some one-off agreements that we need, we will do that. So just so this planning commission knows, we are engaging with Agassiz Rural Water. They've been very good to work with and constructive to work with. The other thing is that we did, and Mr. Kramer thought we came a little late, but we did have a Faulkner Township meeting in January. I won't say it was unanimously positive, but I would say a majority at that point in time were positive and congratulatory regarding this project. And I know since then, they probably have gotten some feedback that hasn't been as positive. So we did reach out, we did meet, we were maybe a little bit late, Mr. Kramer. We did also commit when they wanted additional meetings, we would be there to meet with them on an ongoing basis to do the best we can. But we have followed up on a lot of the concerns.
Thank you.
I chuckled a little bit that after the meeting, I got contacted by a reporter. Did anybody complain or protest? And I said, well, no, we just found out about it. We didn't even know what was going on, so we didn't even have a chance to say yes or no. course, the newspaper came out and said there were nobody opposed to the project in Falconer Township, which was wrong. So I quit talking to the reporters. I don't get too much. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
I don't envy your position on this one.
Thanks, Mr. Kramer, I appreciate it. So back on the plat, I think, talk about the plat. Do we have, back to us, kind of. I mean, well, I'm sure we'll have people getting up more in the annexation.
Oh, is that what you're looking for?
Looking for something, I guess. Moved by Ms. Sandy, second by Mr. Lunsky. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye. Okay, motion 4-1 passes. 4-2, Jane, could you please read that in?
Yes. Item 4-2, vacation of North 32nd Street from 30th Avenue North to 33rd Avenue North.
Now, Mr. Brooks, we didn't talk about this a whole bunch, so just a quick once over. I think I'm getting some head nods, would agree. Okay. Not the whole thing, but just.
Okay, so this one was along the west side of that pond. I'll share it out here real quick again. Here's 33rd up here, here's 30th down here. It's just vacating this piece. We'd no longer need that as part of this project.
Okay. Mr. Budke?
So, I mean, we talked a lot about these contingencies, right? And if the development happens or doesn't, we wouldn't need this piece, the city wouldn't need this piece if the development happens. What if it doesn't happen?
If it doesn't, then we're going to have one very large lot that'll likely have to be replatted anyway, and then we'd be getting additional right-of-way in a lot of different areas.
We'll see this one.
Potentially.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Budke. Good question. No, I had to say it. Mr. Matichek?
Quick question. If this was kept in place, it would originate at 27th, correct?
Is 32nd?
And you're keeping that part from 27th up till 30th, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So that'll still be access for somebody to get in there?
Yes, there's some other owners that are along the east side of North 32nd, and
So why would you want to vacate it in case you might need it someday for future development?
both sides of this property.
I understand you have bigger lots there, but you can still vacate it later. I guess I'm just kind of wondering why, because it's been in there to service that area.
Well, I don't know where they would go to the north. In this case, they'd still have access, public access down to 27th, and 30th is still access that would go out to North Washington.
Right, well, there was originally 3 streets there on Corinthas and 3 streets on the Walsh property, as whatever we call it now.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I just wonder why you're, vacating it, because you could do it anytime. If something else comes in and they're gonna want to build where that street is, I mean, you're still keeping your access from 27th.
The plat's going to incorporate it into a larger lot, and in this case, the property owners would still have access in 2 locations.
Is that larger lot on the PUD?
Yeah, it's on that plat. The plat shows where the vacated piece is.
Coming up to the PUD, is it on there?
Yeah, it's on all the documents, yep.
So it would be in 2 lots then on the PUD? I'm trying to...
Nope, it's just 1 lot, so it's on lot 2.
Okay.
Here's the plat.
Okay.
And here's where that location is at.
Because I know once you give up accesses, they're hard to get back.
Yep. In this case, it's going to be...
Just so you're sure what you're doing, okay.
Yep, it's went through engineering, they've concurred, yep.
Thanks, Mr. Manchek.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Approved by Mr. Rao.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Sandy. Any further discussion? Not seeing any hands, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Mr. Wasvik, could I get who made the motion? I didn't hear. Oh,
Mr.
got it. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Okay, please read in 4.3.
Item 4-3, ordinance to amend the zoning map to include Peony PUD planned unit development located at 3500 27th Avenue North.
Here's the look of the PUD, as we mentioned. If you wanted to add in no land applications, that would certainly be fine. I think it's already in code here, but we can do that just to make sure everybody's aware, and we could place that across the whole PUD for no land applications.
Does that satisfy some of the concerns with 3D?
It-
Sorry, I just want to have a question. Please.
Mr. Gossett, I guess I was just reading this. On exception area B, we're not requiring a conditional use permit on that, wastewater treatment. Do we still have some hammer over them, I assume?
We have, go ahead.
Yeah, the PUD provides us all so the reason we didn't do it through a conditional use is that process would be a 1-month process. Putting it into the PUD is a 2-month process, and we still have all of the other requirements in terms of oversight that we're doing.
But with conditional use, we can review that every so often, and if they're not complying, we can pull that conditional use. Here, we're saying we no longer have that. Do we have some other way to enforce that then?
Well, one is the development agreement and the studies and what they're providing to us. And second is if it's wastewater, they're going to have to comply with the city permits and whatever the terms and conditions of the city permits would be.
Okay.
Very good. Mr. Bucky.
Yeah, so not to belabor the wastewater siting there, that area B, but it is adjacent to Lot 3, right, and the stormwater. So, you know, it sounded earlier like there's some infrastructure that makes sense in that location. But, like, is there any concern about those two being next to each other, right? Wastewater, and I realize it's probably a couple hundred feet, but then you've got the stormwater adjacent to it?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any concerns that there would be cross-contamination, which I understand that you're thinking about, but I know engineering's been looking at all those things as well.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Grasser, do you have something for us?
Just a quick clarification on the wastewater. There's nothing in there that's like a lagoon or anything that would be set on the ground or compacted subsoil. The wastewater treatment plant it's in tanks, basically. And so the wastewater will be contained within tanks, discharged through pipes, so it's basically a fully contained system. I was kind of inferring maybe in some of the questions we're thinking it has like more of a lagoon type of a configuration. It's not that. This is a mechanical plant.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so is that in the development agreement, or is that going to run with the land?
You're talking about the
exception B area, that it's going to be in tanks and not, I mean, could somebody come along tomorrow, different landowner, say, I'm putting lagoons there with that wording?
Well, it's part of the site plan process, but I assume you could certainly put that in there. If it's
Yes.
open land, then you know, we can specific to this and call that out.
I would think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
Just to
Does
answer.
that screw up your development?
It does not, and the
Okay.
reason it doesn't is because in the development agreement, they are to provide their plans with respect to their wastewater and the design and the processes, and it's supposed to satisfy our third-party engineers that are reviewing that. So we've embedded that within the development agreement.
So if I amended this to say it can't be open lagoons, that wouldn't screw up your plans?
It does not.
Okay. I'll move approval, changing exception area B to require no open ponds.
I second that.
Mr. Wasvik.
Schumann. Mr. Phelan.
I think on that, I think we should have, I'm just concerned about if there are some aerobic, yeah. I think if there's some there may be some aerobic systems that, you know, theoretically could be open to the air without any odor. So just because we haven't finalized the design with our permit, I'm concerned that we may limit potentially some appropriate pretreatment systems.
Then you
with
can
that
come
language.
back.
Yeah.
This is preliminary, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
in a month, if we get some of those answers, we can come back, or you can take it out, or we can put it back in.
Yeah.
Okay? You good with that?
I don't want to amend it.
Your motion's good, that's what I said, your motion's good, and John's second's good.
Does the engineer, did you want to say something? Engineer, no?
I
We're
would
good?
say if you do preliminary, we'll come back with a fuller, just so you know, I didn't want you to approve it and then we come back
Okay.
with a more detailed, just because I'm not certain of the specific design of the pretreatment system.
Jenny, I never call engineers up unless I.
Yeah, I think I'm also good with the more strict, and if we need to open it up a little bit more, that's fine, so, okay.
Yeah, if everybody's okay with that. Any further discussion on that?
Sorry, what was the?
No, it was not.
Yeah, and exception area. You get that, Jane?
In exception area B.
You know, Alex and I donated our salaries on P&Z for new screens. We need a sound system, right? Okay, no further discussion, I don't see any hands, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Aye. 4-3 passes. 4-4, Jane, could you please read that in?
Yes. Item 4.4, discussion of annexation of Fufeng property and adjacent properties. Did I read that correctly?
I think we all know what this one is. I do know there's some owners here that are out there, and I do know this impacts them. I do have heard from them before. I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit from them now. Just kind of keep it to the annexation and mask it, I guess, to what we only have control over, and our control is a recommendation to city council, and understand they can do what they will after we recommend to them. So anybody like to come up or file it? Please, in the back there. It's hard to see you guys with the lights blaring at us. Please just state your name and address for the record, please.
Dennis Cadillac, 3900 North Washington Street.
Thank you.
And I appreciate being able to talk to people. And I see you guys really look at it and you're asking questions. There's so many things that are being skipped over here. They talked about that pond at Simplot. Right now, the top of that pond at Simplot is cracked and there's an odor from it. The odor now ain't coming from Red River because they're shut down. The odor's coming from Simplot because there's a crack on that pond. The dike, I bled for the dike back when they took my land for the dike. I was made promises then that weren't kept. They're skipping over a whole bunch of stuff they don't want you to know about. You know, Corinta would have sold his land for what they paid for it, and then they would have had it in the city. There wouldn't have to be none of this annexation. If the people were given the time to go over everything they had to say at the meetings, I would have been talking for over 3 hours, but they limited us to only 3 minutes. And that's why a lot of other people weren't heard, because there were many other people here. And many of them don't even come because we're not going to get a chance to speak. We aren't treated right. And you know, it's very easy to be humble talking to you people because I see you're listening. The other times I've been up here, I'm talking to the wall. And let me just get a minute here. There's all these dirty little secrets that are involved here that they don't tell you about. It's just like with hooking up with the water. Oscarville on 42nd, what they did there, they bought the line from Agassiz, and then they turned around and special access the people of Oscarville for the water, when those people had already paid for hooking up their water. I can expect the same thing to happen again here. They're telling you they don't know. They have a good idea what they're gonna do. If we be offered the same deal they're offering Fufang, we would probably go for it. They're giving them the first decade 90% tax cut. The second decade, 75% tax cut. We could live with that, but we're not being offered that. This whole thing is just maddening because of the way they're skipping over everything. Like I said, why don't they buy the land that's in the city already? Corinta would surely sell it, but there's a whole nother idea behind what they're doing here. And that's why so many acres were done here, so they had the clout to force this annexation. But they're not going to tell you this, and they're never going to admit to it. And you know, right now, he's working on our signatures. We managed to, in 3 weeks, go out and get 5,318 signatures. And as it was pointed out the other night, it was like 92% of how many votes Bochinsky got in the last election. And I'm sorry if I'm not sticking to the annexation, but this is all part of it. But he's going to find any excuse to throw those numbers out. But believe me, those are actual people. Those are citizens like me and you that are all going to be involved in this. And they went out and they signed these petitions because they want to say what's being done here in Grand Forks. We all live in Grand Forks. We all would like to stay living in Grand Forks. We would like it to be a nice environment that would welcome people in. And the other things they don't tell you is these other wet plants they went and looked at is not the same size of this. They're American owned and they're outside the city. And Mr. Matichek pointed out to you how the population has diminished. You know, first thing my wife said when I told her about this, she said, I guess we're going to have to move. And now my wife has lived in our townhouse for 30-some years. And you know, it's a shame that she might not be able to stay there the rest of her life. And I could sit and go on for another 3 hours, but you people really need to dig into this because the facts they don't want you to hear about, they're not talking about. And if you'd like, I'll spend hours with you and I'll go over with what I can show you and how you're dealt with. Because when my property was taken on that dike, I offered them, buy me out, let me out of here. I built out there because I wanted to be outside city limits. 90% of my clientele at that time was farm. It was Mr. Matichek that told me about that parcel being available. And he said, Dennis, you probably better move on it right away because they're going to change it back from I-2 to agricultural because Noft had bought it and he was going to move a tractor dealership out there. So I'm well aware with the land, it's just like the land that Ron Adam owns. That was owned by Corinta back during the flood. And during the flood, I never lost power, water, or any utility at all during the ice storm that preceded it or during the flood. My business was open 24 hours a day during the flood. I got letters both from Northwestern Bell, which was uptown at the time, and from Minkota Power, and they're still in the same place, and they both thanked us for our help because they said they wouldn't have been able to keep going if it wouldn't have been for us. A matter of fact, on 40th North, right next to me, Minkota was so much underwater, they flew a helicopter over to pick up a pump, and we met them out on the road and loaded that pump up. And I'll cut mine short so these other people can say, but if you are really going to consider going with this, I would really appreciate an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I'd go through everything, and I can show you some of the convoluted things that are done here, and it's not right. If this was right, I'd be all for it, but what's being done here is not right. It's going to cost businesses that have been around for 40, 50 years have been passed from father to son, they're gonna go out of business if they're gonna be taxed at what these people are gonna do to us. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Cadillac. In Mr. Cadillac's defense, I was working for an electrical company at the time, and I did buy a lot of pumps from him in that 2-week period. If you remember that, Mr. Cadillac?
Yes, sir, I do.
I was a young whippersnapper then, but 25 years ago. Please approach the mic.
Chairman Monsvik, esteemed commission, I think that Mr. Cadillac's very eloquent, but I'm going to go into a more detailed type description of odors because I was brought up here today. If you can beg, if I can plead your indulgence.
Could we get your name, sir, for the record?
My name is Monty Leek. I'm at 1075 24th Street, Northeast Emaredo. This here is the 2011, August 2011 EPA Principles of Design and Operations of Wastewater Treatment Pond Systems for Plant Operators, Engineers, and Managers. And on an annex to the thing, Module A, I'll page down to number 25. In the winter, treatment efficiencies decrease in the winter with colder temperatures and less sunlight through the ice cover. Shorter periods of sunlight and ice cover limits the amount of photosynthesis. This reduces dissolved oxygen in the pond. The cold water also slows down bacterial action, reducing treatment efficiency. If sufficient ice cover is present, the pond may go anaerobic. Emergent weeds and duckweed die off during this period. Fill and draw ponds are operated by storing wastewater for a spring discharge. Spring. After ice out, odors may occur for several days until dissolved oxygen is restored. As temperatures increase, biological activity increases for both bacteria and algae. Treatment efficiency begins to improve. Okay, we all know that lagoons ice over and then they melt in the spring. The question was brought up, how close are these going to be to the city? I think Mr. Budke said. So we're going to have smells coming from all sorts of directions. If it's hydrogen sulfide, rotten egg smell, that even is a toxic waste material. I think it's regulated. So then I'll go on one more document here, and this is a document by an engineering firm to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And in it, it's a large document. I'm just going to read an excerpt from that again, a conclusion. And this was done partly for a study to not contaminate wild rice in Minnesota. But they went through the whole gamut of how many different kinds of treatment methods are, like pond discharge, and you name it. I'll read some of it here. Alternatives to remove sulfate from wastewater includes source reduction, which is your influent, chemical precipitation, ion exchange, membrane treatment, biological treatment, and evaporative treatment. Well, you're not going to use probably ion exchange or reverse osmosis or evaporate the water so it particulates out. So I'll go down to say here, further down, as demonstrated by the threshold screening, numerous biological treatment processes are under development for sulfate removal. But we know there's going to be a lot of sulfur in this because they use sulfur and hydrosulfur dioxide source to treat the corn, to start the process. Okay. Due to the slow growth of sulfate-reducing bacteria, a much longer retention time is required in the biological reactor than is typically practical in municipal wastewater treatment. In addition, the biological treatment systems for sulfate removal require significant development of design and operational strategies to ensure the success of sulfate-reducing bacteria growth before they can be employed to a full-scale implementation for municipal wastewater treatment. Biological treatment of sulfate has primarily been applied to mine water treatment, where metals are removed by converting sulfate to sulfite as the primary goal, not sulfate removal. So in these settings, low-efficiency biological treatment systems like constructed wetlands and mine pit reactors are practical. However, for municipal wastewater treatment, the retention time requirement and the other operational limitations resulted in technology screening scores on the lowest end of the range compared to the other treatment technologies. So if you use a biological pond, in my opinion, there should be research done. Is this treatment process to qualify for the EPA permit level of 250 parts per million into the Red River? Would you have to build something like Hillsborough Sugar Beet Plant has that goes all the way to the river? You know, what? I don't know, is it 3 miles? So there's my spiel. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Very interesting.
My name's Elizabeth Barber. I am very grateful for your considered responses this evening. I own property about 1.5 miles. I co-own the house that I inherited from my mother who grew up here. We've been refurbishing it, restoring it to period for the last 2 years at the behest of the city, who commanded us to do 25 things all at once, because suddenly 25 things needed to be done, unlike the previous 22 years of inspections. But that's another subject, perhaps.
Could I just get your address? So I just like.
Oh, I live on 32nd Avenue.
But I mean, the address you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
It's near St. Michael's Church.
Ma'am, could I get your name?
I thought you were out there.
Elizabeth Barber is my name.
Elizabeth Barber?
I was just trying to get where I'm at and who's speaking straight.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Anyway, so I spoke a few times previously. My mother had Parkinson's disease for 25 years. It was from pesticides, most likely, gotten through her grandparents' farm in North Dakota over a long period of time, leached through the soil. It was known as idiopathic Parkinson's disease. So your concerns over the pollution are extremely well-founded. Your finding of that one article about the fine is just one of very many. I have another one here of the $1 million that was fined by the governor of Iowa. That was one of his fines. He had several. But there are a list of fines for wet corn milling plants. So it's disturbing that we are here 6 months out from them announcing this to us in October, and we still don't have detailed plans. I went over much of the annual report from 2020 from the Fufeng Group in China. They have 6 wet corn milling plants in China. So it is beyond my imagination that they have 6 plants there, and we do not have any kind of a detailed schematic or diagram for what they plan to build here 6 months after it's been announced. I've been to other hearings of this sort. That is an insult to any committee anywhere that we do not have a baseline diagram of the factory they plan to build, whether or not they buy the land, considering they have 6 of them already in China. So I don't know who they think they're dealing with here, but I hope they don't think they're dealing with stupid, gullible people who will just give in to, well, we think we're going to do something sometime, maybe. We're not sure yet. We should be sure now, because they know how to build these plants. They've been doing it a very, very long time. So
Let's stick to addressing the committee. We want to hear from you.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Anyway, I think that you should not take any kind of a vote that requires permanence without some sort of clarity, with a diagram, with distances, with where things are. You don't have clarity right now. You're asking questions with no answers. So I don't know how you can make a decision without a diagram at the very least, because I have a doctorate in biochemistry. I have a law degree. I don't understand how a community can take a decision of this magnitude without detailed plans, without sending documents to the population it's going to affect. I've never seen anything like this. My mother redid our entire neighborhood after we were flooded in Illinois 2 times with 8 feet of water in the basement. She herself got together with the assessor and had the entire square mile redug so it would never happen again. And that took a year of planning and clear documents and newspaper articles, and there was transparency. I just don't understand what I'm seeing. It's not fair to anybody. So you need more information before you make a decision about things. So anyway, I have an entire file of documents, but that's the upshot. So don't be apologizing for any questions you ask, because there are about 100 questions that have not been answered that have been asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barber. Oh, lost the contact again. Backwards.
You need a minute?
No, I'm good. I'll just blink at everybody.
Hey, Tony Anderson, 1202 South 69th Street.
Thanks, Mr. Anderson.
I have a property on North 81 there, North Washington. Not very good at speaking like this, but I feel that the city has been hiding something. I feel that there should have been more 2 years ago, let the property owners know this was going to happen. I'm developing my property. I just paid a lot of money to run water into my building from the water source that's there now. If I would have known that the city was going to be doing this, probably would have held off. So it's going to be a lot of money out of my pocket that's just wasted. I've got a lot of money in stormwater pipe that runs through my property that drains not only the ditch on 81 there, but across the road. It's going to improve that because it's failing, all on my dollar. And I spent a lot of money on this stuff with no heads up from the city ahead of time. And I just don't think this is fair the way it was handled. I just think this whole thing is ridiculous. It's bullshit that it's even happening.
Thanks, Mr. Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yeah, please.
Chairman Wasvik, members of the committee, thank you. My name is John Warkup. I'm here on behalf of S&S Transport and its related entities. Excuse me, they own property in the area that's sought to be annexed. My clients are concerned about the cost of the annexation, the special assessments, and the resultant increase in taxes if the property is annexed into the city. I think the Commission's questions to the various city representatives are very pertinent, and I also understand Mr. Reichert's concern regarding the possibility that if the project doesn't go through, then various costs might be spread among the entire city and not just the various property owners. But I think that's a very real concern and a very real issue that needs to be addressed. Also, my client is concerned about potential odor. We learned here this evening that there might be enclosed cells and not open ponds. That's very encouraging, but we're concerned that the odor, although it might affect the whole city, my client is very, very near that. And if there even is a slight odor, it might dissipate if it goes over the city, but it would be more concentrated for my client. That's a big concern that we have. With respect specifically to the annexation, we have a map that's been presented, but I heard this evening that the actual annexation could be larger or could be smaller than what is presented to you this evening. I'm not aware of any ordinance that was proposed ordinance of annexation that was presented to the Commission. I'm not aware of any proposed resolution for annexation that was presented to the Commission. It seems difficult for the Commission to make a decision based upon something that might be what was presented to you, or it might be different. That gives me some concern at this point of how the Commission is supposed to make a recommendation on something that might be accurate or might not be accurate. My client is concerned that accuracy, and so we would have some certainty of what's going forward with this matter, not only with the cost and the odors, but also actually what is being annexed and what is being sought to be presented here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Workup.
I apologize, I forgot to bring up the fact that there's a 245,000 acre Cargill plant in Wapaton, a wet corn milling plant. And I've never heard it addressed as to why this plant needs to be built when there is a giant plant that already exists and has existed for a very long time, an hour and 50 minutes south of here. If anyone has an answer to that question, I would be grateful to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh.
Pull the plug yet.
I was wondering.
I've got a chance here to say something.
You bet you do.
Hello, everybody. Back here again at this. I would just like to take note that
Mr.
from the
Spicer,
beginning,
could I get your address?
this project was handled the wrong way.
Mr.
Hold on,
Spicer, could I
Spicer.
get your address?
Craig Spicer, 3225 North Washington.
Thanks, Mr. Spicer.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
It came out of the gate and was handled wrong in the beginning, which created a lack of trust with everybody that I have talked to. It put our backs against the wall to defend ourselves, which we shouldn't have had to do because of the people that handled this project and the way we were treated. I take note that the city council did not defend the citizens of Grand Forks the way they should have with this project, and it set off to a bad start from the beginning. It was an insult to the citizens of Grand Forks to propose this project in the beginning, with all of the negatives, all of the red flags, all of the untrust, all of the problems that this thing creates, and all of the money that's been spent. So the proposal that we had to encounter was to enact a petition. And now, because of the way the law practices of this city were handled, it was an insult to the citizens to be intimidated by having the police station make calls to correct or analyze what that petition was about. I think it fundamentally breaks down our process of who we are and what this country stands for. So I'm embarrassed for those people. At the same time, as we go through this, we need to consider that there's a lot more people involved in this than we take note of, that we should really sit down and think about a lot of the people that signed this petition and a lot of people that wanted to sign it that were intimidated also. So what I would like to say in closing is that we could possibly keep working against this project, and we would like to be handled in a much better way than it's been handled now. Thank you.
Mr. Spicer, you got, I mean,
Pardon me?
I know we've been in some of the meetings together on the annexation part and your business part. I mean, I want to hear, what do you feel like?
About the annexation?
Yeah.
Well,
Just that on
I'm
your
not against
business.
progress, and I'm not against annexation, but this is a different type of annexation because they approached us with the idea that they were going to benefit what they were going to bring to us. When in reality, it would just actually put us back farther because we have all the services we need. So in back hindsight, we'd be paying twice for things that we already have. So that in itself is a definite downshot from what we should be doing in the first place. Now, I don't know how you remedy that. They have proposed some pretty good initiatives to us to promote this thing. So, I mean, I'm willing to listen to that, of course. But there's still a lot of numbers and a lot of eggs and a lot of this and that because they want to put it on the fast track that we don't know. So that makes me nervous and makes me kind of say, you know, let's hold up. Let's just hold off a little bit. I mean, maybe we could have tabled some of the things that went on here tonight. I don't know if that would have caused that much, more problems, but that's how I feel.
And no, thank you for answering a couple of my questions, Mr. Spicer. I do appreciate, that. Kind of being in the same meetings where you're looking at some of the same things, trying to figure out what to do with it too. And I think the idea of, we're just going to recommend this. You heard that in City Council.
Right.
We got 30 days. If we'd have tabled it, we wouldn't even got a voice. So we wanted to take it on.
Okay.
They would have taken it on without us in 30 days, which our next meeting is over 30
Yeah.
days. So we wanted to hear what you had to say, everybody to it, and make our own kind of decisions. But as a landowner, does that help to kind of put that meat in there if they do make a motion that way? To put the teeth in there, if something does happen where this goes away, we go back to where we were. Does that help? I'm just looking
Yeah,
at
no,
my side too.
I think that we made some progress here tonight, and I think this was a much better discussion with the commission than it was with the council. I'll be honest about that. Very receptive, and I appreciate all your concerns, so.
Okay, no, thanks a lot. Did anybody else have any questions for Mr. Spicer? Well, I kind of pulled them back up.
No, that's fine. I'm more than willing to answer anything, you know.
No. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mr. Spicer. Appreciate that.
Excuse me? There is one more thing that needs to be heard here. They want to fast track this project. They've been fast tracking everything. But that gentleman there, he publicly stated that he's got 20 days to look at those petitions, and he's going to take the 20 full days, whether it takes him that long or not. Is that fast tracking? They treat us one way and then they treat other people another way. They're supposed to be treated one way and we're treated differently.
Understood. That's why we put a lot of the little things on there we have tonight. I think this commission is looking out. I really do. I really do. Please step up to...
I'm Sheila, Craig's wife, you know who I am.
Could you just state it for Jane, please?
Sheila Spicer. I called the Commerce Commissioner, James Lehman, in Bismarck, and asked him why this plant was brought here and why it was brought in the spot it was. He said, I don't put him in your city, I bring him to North Dakota. I said, then why in the heck did they put it in city limits? And he said, that was up to the city council and you guys, EDC. He said, I had nothing to do with it. I said, you put it right within, I said, we got UND, one of the nicest schools in North Dakota. I have called the public affairs in UND, they smell that Red River biodiesel plant quite often. That's in their little area. What is this plant going to do? And I did say, I asked him, I said, what, he said, with bringing these in, I said, what, he said, we don't pick anything. He said, they did it all. And I said, why do they bring something in that's so bad? I know it's because of the pilot plan. You have to get the free money for these boys out here, which if they are such a huge company and so huge in China, why can't they pay their own bills? Is what I want to know. Why are we all having to put up with this plant right in the city limits? You're going to sink the whole town up.
Yeah, just address us so we can hear
I'm
you.
sorry.
As soon as you step away from the microphone, we can't hear.
We are going to smell, I have so many people saying, we're going to stink our town up. And it's the truth that it's going to smell when they bring it in, and you know it. And I did call Bergham's, one of his office girls called me, and I asked the same question, and she said her comment was, they put it on the old side of town. The old side of town. There's people that live on that old side of town that pay taxes. Wait till you get annexed in. Mr. Wasvik, you're probably going to be next. You know that.
I am right down the road from you guys where it makes all my money, so.
I've already heard that. You will be annexed in. But I'm saying, it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of saying. You guys you should have put it somewhere where you didn't put it to serve everybody in town. And you didn't.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've heard it. I think great discussion, everybody. Appreciate everything, getting us up to speed, being respectful to each other. That's what it's all about. So with that, we have our final item, 4.4, has been read into the documents. I guess basically up to us at this point. Do we have a recommendation for the council?
So how are we doing this? We're just making a recommendation? We're making a motion?
I think we make a regular motion and address the item as we always have. And then they can
Put the
take
word
it.
recommendation in front of it.
And they can take it where
Okay.
they need to take it.
So I'd make the motion that we recommend the annexation contingent, and that they look at the contingency of the Fufeng business, and also explore the island that will be created in that agreement. And I'm doing this so that we can put that Fufang contingency in. Otherwise, if we don't make that recommendation, if we just say no to the whole thing, they have every right to move forward, and then we may not be heard on our recommendation of that contingency. If that makes sense.
Jane, did you get that?
I can't say it twice.
But does anybody
approve with a contingency that it not happen until Fufang is further down the road, or?
I don't know, we're not part of the development plan, so I have a hard time doing, and really, it's ultimately up to the city council. I just want them to know that we'd like that to be explored.
I want the safety net there for the businesses on this, like you said.
Yeah, but also so that the landowners can move forward.
Yeah, Jenny? We need to second it before we have a discussion, right?
Yes.
I'll second.
Thanks, Jenny, go ahead.
I know we've never seen the purchase agreement between the landowners. Is there a contingency in the agreement or in the development agreement that if the development agreement doesn't go through, why would Fufang want the land? So is there a contingency in the purchase agreement? I feel like they're going to buy the land, but then as we move through the development agreement and it doesn't come to fruition, then Fufang has land that what are they going to do with?
Excuse me. Ms. Rowell, there isn't a condition about, in that regard, there is a condition that, one of the multiple conditions is that it gets annexed, it gets replatted and rezoned. Those are the three conditions that would have to, as part of the development agreement. Whether that happens tonight or not, I mean, tonight's action isn't dependent upon the development agreement. You don't need a development agreement to rezone, to replat.
Yeah.
And so what would happen is, if they went forward and the conditions under their purchase agreement have been satisfied, then the seller could then say, we're closing.
Yeah.
And now Fufang has got a piece of property that, you know, if they don't meet all the other conditions, they got a piece of property that they're probably going to end up having to sell or do something with eventually.
Okay. At which point then, going back to Alex's question of, once you annex property, you can't unannex it.
There is a statute with respect to landowners at a certain percentage of their value, I think it's 75% of the value in the area, they can request to be de-annexed.
Okay.
There is a statute that allows for that.
Haven't seen it before.
Right. Well, okay.
Mr. Schumacher, do you have something?
I guess just to clarify the motion, so I understand, earlier there was a lot of talk about the funding and the approvals of that, and, you know, it was stated early subject to include that. Was that, are we broad enough, or does that need to be more specific? Seemed to be a big conversation.
So do you want the motion read back?
Yeah, or just the intent, Megan, that you had, and then maybe read back so we understand. I guess I'm not exactly clear if the funding part is in there. That took a big...
The funding
If Fufang goes away, I think the intent was then the annexation, we would recommend taking it off.
Okay, because there was even some stipulation about funding at the state level being approved, you know, on all those regards, even if it went forward, I believe.
Megan, go ahead.
If I understand this right, so by adding the contingency of Fufang coming to town, then if they don't, there potentially wouldn't be an annexation. So that would cover that because there wouldn't be those costs. Am I understanding your question?
Somewhat, yeah. I guess, and I guess my part is that if they didn't come to town, it still could potentially be annexed. But I guess the way it's stated is that our recommendation is that if it doesn't get approved and they don't come to town, that we would not be annexed. Is that the point of the motion?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I think it's asking them to consider that, because we're just making a recommendation at this point, so I just want to ask them to consider having that contingency.
Yep, thanks.
Okay.
Very good.
Ms. Sandy, can we just kind of go over that, your motion, to make sure that I get it down correctly? You recommend the annexation and look at the contingency and islands created so that we can put that in. I'm kind of confused on that part.
So that the land can close, but
Yes.
there's protection if the project doesn't get built. Right?
Correct. There's a contingency that if the project doesn't go through,
The annexation.
neither will the annexation.
Okay.
Mr. Wasvik, I would put a contingency on the motion and subject to final review and approval of the city attorney's office regarding the motion and the annexation agreement that you're speaking of. So Mr. Gosted could come up with a written plan in advance to city council so they can review what that might look like. I think that would be helpful. I think we have a general sense of what you're looking for, and I would ask, as part of the motion, to ask Mr. Gosted to come up and with a plan that the city council could consider.
I assume they're going to have a million questions for Mr. Gosted by the time that comes, and I think that's the spirit of the whole thing, is there's nothing binding about what we're doing here today, so we're trying to give direction to Mr. Gosted and to the entire city council, I think.
The way I understand the directive is, one, to assure ourselves that that contingency can be included, but assuming it can be, that be considered by the city council with respect to the development of Fufeng. And also, I think you're asking me to review that Corinta, the non-annexation agreement, to see what the impact of that is as well.
Correct.
Yep.
That's about perfect.
Yep.
Ms. Sorrell, do you agree with that as your second?
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're good with it?
Yep.
Thanks for helping clarify that. With that, Mr. Spicer?
Could I get an individual vote count?
Yeah.
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
He wants a roll call, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fine. Yeah, that is what it is.
Only one of us has to ask for it, that's fine.
Yeah, one of us just has to ask for it, no problem. Okay, with that, call for a vote.
Can I speak?
You can. I'm sorry, I didn't know you wanted to.
Thanks. And because this is just, it's non-binding, city council wants to know what this body thinks, I think we all should tell them what we think. I want to start off with city staff, who have gotten a lot of grief over this and what they've done. And I can only imagine that city staff has been working a lot of overtime on this. And I'm going to vote against this, okay? I'm not a fan of this project. But I am a fan of the work that the city is doing and city staff is doing, and I don't see any ill will at all. This is an incredibly complex problem. It is massive. I think what you're doing in having lots of different studies being done and lots of contingencies built into the development agreement is absolutely the right way to do it, and I applaud you for the work that you've done. To me, this is too soon. I think we should wait. I think we should wait to see what the vote is from the city, from the citizens of the city, before we move forward. But I also think that as we do this, the city needs to be thinking, what do we want? Do we want bigger for no reason? Do we want bigger just to be bigger? Or do we want better? Do we want to make this city better? Right now, I'm not sure that this project makes the city better. But I can be convinced I think it can. But there are a lot of questions to be answered. I think the frustration from so many of the citizens is that they don't have the answers. But it's not the city's fault at this point, I don't think. I don't think it's the people that work for the city's fault. They're trying. And I know they're working hard on it. And I hope that they continue to work on it, and I hope they continue to try and find new development to come into this town. And I hope that no matter how this turns out, they don't become frustrated and look at it as some sign that we don't want any business or that we're anti-business in some way, because I know the people on this commission are not. I've worked with them for a long time, and they are very pro-business. But we worry about the things in this town that a lot of people bring up. I enjoyed the conversation we had tonight. I feel much, much better about the fact that these sewage lagoons are going to be contained, that they're not going to be open. I've said before, if this town stinks anymore, I'm leaving. And my kids probably won't live here. But if we can assure that that's not going to happen, that takes away a lot of my concerns. So while I'm voting against this tonight, I think it is important that we as a city move forward with all kinds of projects and look at all kinds of different ways and always think, are we making this city better? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raker. With that, any further discussion? So we'll vote on the recommendation and the motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor signify by saying.
I think you want to do roll call vote.
Roll call vote.
Should I read off the
Yep.
names? Okay.
Please do.
All right, Arell,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
Kuhn, Lunsky,
Yes.
Matacek,
No.
Reichert,
No.
Sandy,
Yes.
Schumacher,
Yes.
Wasvik.
Yes.
Six in favor and 2 against.
So,
Passes, or whatever.
yeah, no.
Passes to give that recommendation.
It passes to, and I hope everybody understands, we're not voting for the whole project. We're voting for a recommendation on annexation to bring this in so they hear what we have to say. And they're gonna, and what you guys said, that's what we did right here. So I want everybody to understand that. It wasn't we wanted everybody to hear what these guys had to say and what we had to say. So that's what happened in a nutshell. Okay, item 4-5.
All right, item 4-5, ordinance to amend Chapter 8 Land Development Code to amend Section 18-0802 relating to comprehensive plan to update the 2050 land use plan.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. So we've been working on this for quite some time. And SRF has had some public open houses, and Scott Harmstead's on the line. I know he's been here before you previously. He does have about I want to say a 20-slide presentation, but we'll open that up to, I think he knows that he'll be brief as you would like to be, so, as he's hearing that for the first time. So with that.
Just in all fairness to Mr. Armstead, just give a minute for the room to clear out a second so that, otherwise we're not going to hear a thing he says.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Matacek. It's hard to hear right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brooks, I've been involved in quite a few land use plans over the years. Okay, do you still have a provision in your land use plan where it is a goal to try to preserve pristine farmland within the area?
Yeah,
because it always was in there before.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is where the Fufeng plant's going to go, the 370 acres there, is prime farmland. And we've got land just west of town, not too far from here, that's not good land. It's alkaline, it won't even grow a tree. And there's large chunks of it. And yet it seems surprising to me that we want to take 370 acres of really good farmland out of production when we have other areas where this plant could have went. And I understand that they looked at other sites, but it just kind of, to me, it's kind of a sin to even do that. Being a farmer, you know, you want to produce the most stuff you can, and the only way you do that is on good land.
Yeah,
So I just want to make sure that we still have that in our land use code, that it's one of our goals is to try to keep farmland, good farmland.
It is, and so there's many policies that are in there, and they're, you know, there's many things, there's pushes and pulls with all of those. Obviously, the land here, you know, I know it's been sold, and you know, it's up to the developers, it's up to property owners as well that may want to sell that for property to be developed. So.
Yeah, and I understand that homeowners want a piece of ground that's going to grow grass and grow trees, and yes, they've taken a lot of the good farmland on the south end of town to build houses on. But this is industry. Industry doesn't need to do that. Industry needs to be out in big chunks of land that for basically have no value. I mean, really, no farming value. And you just go a little bit west of Grand Forks. You know, Grand Forks is a very distinct county. It has the best land in the state and the worst land in the state, all within a couple miles of each other. And that's what really kind of bothers me about this whole project, is the fact of the location. When there's other locations that would be, and actually some of them are even closer to services than this one would be.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that go into a piece of property and why it gets developed and why somebody sells it for development when they sell it. So I know all of those factors come into play, and when utilities, location, airport, all of those things come into play. So with that, I'll turn over to the chair. I think.
Thank you for letting me comment. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Matichak. That's what we're here for. Mr. Armstead, please. Quick report.
Yes. Can I get a thumbs up that that I can be heard? Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. All right, I'll share my screen. I do have a presentation. Okay, so thanks for your time tonight.
Reconsidered, have you? Haven't reconsidered, have you? No. Didn't think so, Gary. Line your pockets, buddy. How about you guys here? Reconsidered? What's up? Anything changed for you?
I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback.
Yeah, I guess please try to respect, try to get this guy, Mr. Armstead, to talk to us. Go ahead, Mr. Armstead.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, so yeah, again, I'll try to make this brief. A lot of time for questions, comments. So what is the plan? This plan is it's a key part of what is your comprehensive plan. The state century code requires all cities, counties, jurisdictions in the state to have a comprehensive plan in order to enforce or have zoning regulations. So this is, in other words, your land use constitution that guides and supports all the regulations you have and with respect to development.
Could somebody go to the door?
Often it's could be referred to as a blueprint for growth. It has a long-term vision. This, you know, the year 2050 is in the name, and that is, it's meant to be a document that envisions what Grand Forks should be in 2050. It not only includes this, or focuses on the city within the city limits, but also the extraterritorial area. So this includes the 2-mile area. There's some small exceptions to that, but it's just the 2-mile area. It also, and so this is primarily funded with federal funding through the MPO. And the reason for that is it's tied very closely to the long-range transportation plan, or the metropolitan transportation plan is what it's called now, which will be updated as a next step to this. East Grand Forks has just gone through this process as well, because the land use outlook that's in this plan is a huge factor as far as the transportation needs, the long-range transportation needs of the community. So again, it's really important to emphasize that this plan, in terms of what we're talking about in terms of land use, is not the same as zoning. It's what supports or guides zoning decisions. This is not the main regulatory document that staff works from. is the Land Development Code. Okay, because this is meant to be a long-term document that is meant to be the vision of the community as far as development goes, there is always a concerted effort to do our best in terms of public and stakeholder engagement. So because of that, all these different items have been integral to the whole process. There's been a land use subcommittee, and we've met a number of times, 5 or 6 times throughout the process, about a year and a half. We've had a couple of public workshops, focus groups of some of the players from different facets, representing different facets of the community. They were very helpful. We've had an online element to it that included a survey and a map people could provide input on, and there was also things were a bit tricky with COVID. When we started this, COVID was an issue that limited what we could do in person, but we did have a pop-up, call it a pop-up event, an in-person event, which is shown here at the Potato Days in the Park event. So here's what's in the plan, and I'll kind of step through most of these as I go through the presentation. The first chapter talks about what is called livability principles. A part of this chapter has to do with, because this involves federal funding through the MPO, there are a number of federal initiatives that the FHWA and the MPO look for to make sure that this is that we're compliant with following basically the strings attached to the federal funding. I think there's definitely value in doing this and in making sure that the plan looks out and is sustainable in terms of, mainly sustainable in terms of the what it's talking about. But these are just some of the items that this chapter goes over. A key part of the plan, and the next slide I'll show some maps for you, but has to do with the future land use map. And as part of that map, we have future land use categories. These are, and they're all listed here, from agricultural. There's 2 residential ones, a rural and urban, commercial, industrial, mixed use, public and open space. And those relate directly to this map. So this is the future land use map. These are different ways of looking at the future land use map. The green is agricultural. There was a question asked about preservation of agricultural land, and I can talk a little bit more about that later. But anyways, the green is agricultural. There's not too much of it, but there is a light yellow, light brown that recognizes existing rural residential subdivisions. There's the bright yellow is an urban residential designation. The purple is industrial, and then so the map on the all areas primary map shows existing and planned areas for future land use. Oh, I'm sorry, the blue is the airport or public. And then the middle map shows areas in color that are not developed yet, so you can see what is anticipated in the next 30 years for fringe development. And then the land use change activation areas map, this one here, just focuses within the city and what we're calling activation corridors. These are corridors in the city, most of which are a little bit older or not quite developed all the way, where we're looking to concentrate more development activity, especially mixed-use opportunities, residential, commercial opportunities. And there's also some sites, some activation sites like the Columbia Mall, and there's also an infill piece there to the south as well, on the south side of 32nd. Those are areas that we see as underutilized today that could have some more intensive growth or redevelopment occur. This is something that's very unique. The first time, I believe, that your land use plan has looked at these opportunities at this scale, and it's something that was asked of us, and we spent a lot of time looking at these opportunities. But the plan doesn't just look in, of course, it looks out. There's just simply not enough capacity within the city. When you talk about vacant lots within the city or redevelopment opportunities, there's just not enough land within the city to accommodate all the growth that is anticipated in the next 30 years. Knowing that, we're going to have to accommodate fringe development, and then what we do is we break that down into different tiers of growth. So this 2050 growth tiers map here shows all of that. So the brown is the initial tier, which looks out is intended to accommodate the next 30 years of development. That is really shaped by the flood protection areas primarily. And then the orange is a second tier, which is like I could call it an urban reserve, kind of the what if growth is even more aggressive than what we're anticipating. And then the tier 3 is really, for lack of a better term, an agricultural preservation area where development is very unlikely to occur, or the need for it is very unlikely. We've also looked closely at your strategic infrastructure growth areas that have been identified for quite a while, and that the city is invested in quite extensively in terms of infrastructure dollars. And a lot of those areas do correlate to our tier 1 growth areas. Actually, they all correlate to the tier 1 growth areas. And then these are just some numbers as far as those tiers and the acreages involved that we're talking about. So how do we do this? How do we project growth and over the next 30 years? Well, we look at projected population, largely based on trends over the recent history. And so 2050, we're projected to have another over 35,000, almost 36,000 residents in the city. And that's just not residents, but it's jobs and households that it's broken down into. And those relate to, respectively, commercial, industrial, and residential use of land. And so that's some context on how the growth projections work. Just wanted to show some comparison between your 2045, your existing land use plan, and your 2050 plan. The colors are a little different, but generally speaking, there is a pretty significant change in the tier 1 growth area. It is more extensive this time around, simply because the projections are a bit more, are higher. So it's a result of that. Another comparison, I think between 2045 and the current proposal for the 2050 plan, a big difference here is we've added an infill component here, and it shows the acreages that we see as opportunities as far as infill. And you can see the differences in the tier 1. The 2045 tier 1 is just over 2,000 urban residential acres, for example. The current proposal for tier 1 urban residential is almost 2,800 acres. I mentioned these activation areas. Again, there's some corridors. A good example is, another one is University Avenue. There was a study done on that corridor, and so we've brought those recommendations into this plan as an example. The plan also contains goals and objectives that we went over extensively with our focus groups and with our subcommittee. They cover these topical areas: housing, transportation, public health, economic development, and just general development. These are all things that definitely relate to land use. Then we have some information in the plan about case studies. And the reason we did these case studies is to really understand, even from a financial perspective, the differences when you look at infill development versus fringe development. We were also asked to look at that in terms of at a certain level. And so what we ended up doing is looking at some case studies. We compared fringe, we looked for fringe development. We looked at a relatively recent subdivision, Prairiewood Estates. We eventually got down to, well, what is the city revenue per acre in a subdivision similar to that or like that one, and that's shown here. And then we looked at some infill examples, and these are residential, higher density residential, multifamily, and the revenue per acre of those is shown here as well. This was also provided just to provide some context for you as decision makers and for staff as they review development proposals as well. So we have a number of different things to analyze, different ways we've analyzed residential development, different types of residential development, and also different types of commercial development. You know, some questions to think about too. You know, one of the things that was interesting about commercial development is that over time, generally speaking, the trend is that on a per acre basis, commercial development tax revenue has decreased. Why is that? Good question to think about, but it might have to do with, does it have to do with the character of it or the type of commercial development we're talking about? But there's some things that have come up through that analysis. Before I kind of wrap things up too, I want to mention that the last chapter is an implementation chapter, and that's pretty important as well. I was going to quickly show you a page, the first page from that. So let me bring that over here for you. No, I'm not sure if I can. One second.
We can always show that at next month too if we need to.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to show this, that there's, it talks about a land use plan committee, and that committee would oversee the implementation to ensure that this plan, help to ensure that this plan is carried out. So we see that as integral to the success, long-term success of this plan. So I was just going to show that. And we have a number of implementation actions that are discussed here. There are a couple that actually talk about agricultural preservation. And I can talk more about that if you'd like me to. So with that, just wrap things up here. There will be one more consideration before this commission of the plan next month, but it will also go to the city council from here, of course, and there's going to be the MPO the MPO's technical advisory committee will consider this, as well as the MPO's executive policy board will consider this plan. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments you might have.
Were there any questions or comments from the commission? Sorry, Mr. Budke.
I'll be brief. Just wanted to thank you, Mr. Harmstead, for all the work that went into this. I was especially happy to see the slide you included here on the case studies, right? The comparison between the fringe development and the infill. I think that it's very good evidence as to why the infill is an important component to add to this version of the plan. It's just really striking to me to see, like, on a per acre basis that redevelopment like the lumber exchange is literally twice as valuable in terms of revenue than some of our fringe development. So I think there's I'm not completely surprised by that. I suspected that or seen some similar analyses from other communities. So I'm glad that it's showing up here. That's all I've got for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Budke. Mr. Reichert?
Same comment on that, Scott. Is there a way we can do something that compares apples to apples instead of R1 to R4? Because, I mean, I think obviously R4 is going to be a heck of a lot more valuable than R1 is per acre.
Yeah, you could do something close to that with the information we've provided in the plan, because we did break down, I might actually have it here.
Yeah, I saw it by
housing
types, yep.
By housing type at least.
Yep.
And you can compare the housing types allowed in R4, you know, here, so, yep.
Sorry, one last thing. You mentioned apples to apples, and I understand that, right, in terms of the format or the type of house, but I'm not sure you can get more apples to apples than like a simple per acre calculation, right? Like
the issue there is R4, I don't care if it's infill or on the edge of town, is going to be worth more per acre than an R1 is. Isn't it?
There are some differences though that we looked at. We also looked at, and I don't have it here, but we also looked at the infrastructure costs as well. And that gets a little tricky. There's no easy answer, because typically when you have infill development, it's because the infrastructure is there and they don't have to replace, they're usually going to do that development because they don't have to replace a significant amount of infrastructure. It's been updated because of say it's the lumber exchange, like the flood control project gave them a leg up because that had improved recent infrastructure, as an example. So usually infill happens because the infrastructure is set up for it. So when we look at fringe development, we you know, there is that added cost of new infrastructure for that. So it's really hard to do the straight apples to apples, but what we can do is we can look at lot size comparisons. Generally speaking, we can look at the housing type, yeah, there are going to be some infill developments that might be pretty cost prohibitive just because the infrastructure around it might be outdated and in a terrible shape. So,
thanks, Scott.
Perfect.
Do we need to vote on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is preliminary approval. It'll come back for final.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Akert,
Second.
second by Ms. Earl.
Can I make a comment?
For sure, discussion, any further?
Well, yeah, I appreciate 2050. I'll be 101 and I'll probably still be on this commission.
You know what, Frank, I could only hope and pray for both of those.
45 will be 96, it can maybe make that.
Great comment, Frank, and we all hope you'll still be here.
Right. I know.
All right, with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Unanimously passes. Thank you, Scott, for your hard work, and I just reiterate what everybody said. This is really a nice looking plan and everything from last time, so thank you.
They've done a fantastic job, so.
Excellent.
Chair Wozniak, I just wanted to say 6-0 is being pulled. We're going to have that probably as an action item, probably in May, but in consideration of time. And I just want to say thank you to all the commission. I know you guys are a volunteer board and you went above and beyond tonight, so I want to thank you for, you know, putting together 3+ hours, and I'm sure you guys were getting emails and, you know, all the research that went into this, so I appreciate it, and I know everybody does, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you for your time.
Move to adjourn. Second. So moved. Meeting adjourned. I just wanted to slap that.